You've been lied to about peace. They told you it comes from having all the answers, from planning every step, from knowing exactly what's next. But if that were true, why does the future still scare you? Why do your thoughts spiral the moment things get quiet? Why does the unknown feel like a threat instead of a doorway? The truth is, peace doesn't come from control. It comes from surrender, not weakness but the deep strength to sit with uncertainty and smile anyway. This is what Buddhism teaches, not just in temples or ancient books, but in the silence of your breath, in the stillness behind your thoughts, in the space where you finally stop running and just let yourself be. For thousands of years, monks, sages, and seekers have all found the same truth. You don't need to escape the unknown, you need to make friends with it. Tonight, as you listen, your fear will loosen its grip, your heart will begin to soften, your mind will stop clinging and start resting. And when morning comes, you won't just feel rested, you'll feel free. This isn't just another bedtime audio. This is a quiet revolution inside you. This is the night everything starts to change. Are you ready? Let's begin. You've made it here, to this quiet moment. The world outside is still spinning, busy chasing answers, hunting for guarantees, trying to predict and control. But right now, in this stillness, something inside you is shifting. Not because you've figured everything out, but because you've finally stopped needing to. You've felt how heavy it is to always know, to always plan, to always hold everything together. There's something deeply freeing about loosening your grip, not falling apart but opening. And that's what this moment is for. Not fixing, not solving, just returning. Returning to something that was never broken, something simple, something sacred, the power of not knowing. We've been taught to fear not knowing. From the time we were young, we were rewarded for having the answer. The right one, the quick one. In school, at work, in conversations. If you didn't know something, you felt behind, less than, unsafe. And so we trained our minds to seek certainty like a dog chasing a scent. We learned to hate the silence after a question we couldn't answer. We learned to tense when life gave us blank spaces. And the result? A deep inner pressure to fill every gap, to label every feeling, to explain every outcome, to control every step. But Zen teaches something different. It doesn't ask you to master the unknown. It asks you to meet it, without armor, without answers, without pretending. This is the heart of what Zen calls Shoshin, the beginner's mind. It's not childish, it's not naive. In fact, it may be the most mature state of being there is. Beginner's mind doesn't mean you know nothing. It means you don't cling to what you think you know. You stay open, you stay soft, you stay curious, like someone seeing rain for the first time, or hearing their name whispered in a way they've never heard before. In the beginner's mind, you don't rush to conclusions. You let the moment speak. And the moment is always whispering, but most people are too busy thinking to hear it. There's a story in Zen about a scholar who visited a great master. The scholar wanted to learn Zen, but he came full of ideas, comparisons, theories. The master quietly poured him a cup of tea. When the cup was full, he kept pouring. The tea overflowed. The scholar shouted, "It's full, no more will go in." The master looked at him and said, "Like this cup, you are full of your own opinions and assumptions. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup?" That's what beginner's mind does. It empties the cup. In our daily lives, we carry around a full cup, filled with judgments, with stories about who we are, who others are, how things should go. These ideas don't just shape our view, they limit it. They make us quick to react, slow to understand, easy to anger, hard to forgive. They make us certain that we know what's best, but when we're certain, we stop listening, and that's when we suffer. Not because the world is against us, but because we stopped seeing it clearly. Beginner's mind is not just about being humbly, it's about being free. Free from the pressure to always be right. Free from the burden of predicting everything. Free from the fear of saying, I don't know. Think about how much conflict comes from needing to be right. Think about how many relationships strain because one or both people need to prove something, to defend a belief, to win an argument. But in beginner's mind, there's nothing to defend. You can listen without reacting, observe without judging, speak without forcing. You realize that not knowing doesn't make you weak, it makes you real. Shoshin is not passive. It's not about giving up. It's about showing up fully, without filters, without scripts. You notice more. You feel more deeply. Because you're not busy protecting your idea of the world, you're actually in it. It takes real courage to live this way, because the truth is, not knowing is uncomfortable. We like certainty because it feels like control, but that control is often an illusion. We don't really know what tomorrow will bring. We don't know what someone else is thinking. We don't know how a moment might unfold. And when we stop pretending that we do, something incredible happens. We stop trying to force life into a mold, and we start experiencing it. This is what Zen points us toward, a direct experience of life, free from filters. When you drop your stories about how things are supposed to be, you see how they actually are. And you might be surprised by what you find. Beauty where you never looked, grace in places you judged, joy that doesn't depend on everything going your way. Beginner's mind also invites deep attention. When you're not rushing to categorize or compare, you slow down. You taste your food more. You hear the leaves rustling outside your window. You notice your breath without needing to change it. You realize that every moment has something to offer, but only if you're there to receive it. Think about how rare that is. How often do we live in our heads instead of our lives, planning the next move, replaying the past, holding conversations that haven't happened yet, worrying about futures that may never come. It's exhausting, it's endless, and it keeps us from the one place peace actually lives, here, now. But the moment you let go of needing to know, you arrive. And it feels like stepping off a treadmill that's been running for years. Like exhaling after holding your breath too long. In the beginner's mind, you don't just experience stillness, you become stillness. Not frozen, but deeply rooted. Like a tree that bends with the wind, not because it's weak, but because it knows its strength. And here's something beautiful. Beginner's mind doesn't mean you give up your intelligence or insight. It means you use them more wisely, you ask better questions, you listen longer, you stay teachable. Even when you're the teacher, you don't mistake knowledge for truth, because knowledge changes. But truth is what you feel in your bones when you're not trying to be clever, when you're just present. In Zen, there's a saying, don't seek the truth, just drop your opinions. It sounds simple, but it's not easy, because opinions feel safe. They give us identity, belonging, familiarity. But they also blind us. They make us predictable, defensive, and most of all, they make us miss what's right in front of us. Beginner's mind is about waking up to what's actually happening, instead of what we think is happening. It's the difference between seeing the ocean and labeling it water. One is a concept, the other is an experience, and only one can calm you. Letting go of knowing also softens fear, not because you become fearless, but because you stop resisting uncertainty. You learn to stay open in the face of not having answers. And that's where true peace begins, not in knowing what's next, but in trusting yourself to meet it when it comes. When you live from this place, you become more gentle. With others, with yourself. You stop demanding perfection. You stop needing to fix everything. You begin to see that some questions are more alive without answers, that some mysteries are meant to be honored not solved. There's no map for the unknown, but there is a compass, and that compass is awareness. Not knowing doesn't mean drifting, it means navigating with presence instead of panic. And presence is powerful. When you're fully here, you respond instead of react. You breathe before you speak. You listen to your intuition. You notice the quiet shifts in your body. You hear the tone beneath someone's words. You sense when to move and when to wait, when to speak and when to stay silent. This kind of knowing comes from not knowing. Beginner's mind isn't something you achieve once and keep forever. It's a practice, a returning. Every day we forget. Every day the ego wants to be right again, wants to prove something, wants to feel certain. But every day we can pause, take a breath, empty the cup. And in that emptying we begin again, softly, clearly, freely. The world will keep pulling you into stories about who you are, about what's true, about how life should go. But beginner's mind gives you space to pause, to choose, to return. It reminds you that you are not your thoughts, not your roles, not your opinions. You are the awareness behind them, the stillness watching it all. And that stillness doesn't need to know. It just needs to be. So tonight, as your thoughts rise and fall like waves, let them come, let them go. Don't fight them, don't follow them, just notice them. Let your mind rest, not in answers but in openness. Feel how good it is to let go of needing to solve everything before you sleep. Feel how peaceful it is to simply not know. And feel how, somehow, in that not knowing you finally feel safe. You finally feel home. You've just felt the weight of not knowing lift from your chest. That subtle relief of realizing you don't have to figure it all out anymore. You're starting to see that peace doesn't live in answers, it lives in presence. But even now, a quiet part of you still wonders. What about the consequences? What about the results of what I do? Don't my actions create my future? Yes, they do, but not in the way you think. Not as a system of rewards and punishments, or a scoreboard keeping track of your worth. The truth of karma is far more liberating and far more misunderstood. Most people hear the word karma and think fate, like some cosmic force that decides what you deserve, that if something bad happens, it must be your fault. That if life isn't going your way, it's because you did something wrong. But this belief turns karma into a prison, and that's not what karma is meant to be. In its original form, karma simply means action, movement, cause and effect, not divine judgment, not punishment. Just a law as natural as gravity. Everything you do has a ripple. Every thought, every word, every choice leaves a trace. Not because the universe is watching to reward or punish you, but because reality is woven together. Nothing stands alone. Understanding this can bring an incredible sense of peace, because it shows that your life is not random, but it also frees you from the illusion of control. You don't get to control all the outcomes, only your part. Your intention, your direction, your heart behind the action. When you live from this space, you shift from trying to control results to simply planting good seeds. You no longer act from fear or manipulation. You act because it's right, because it feels aligned. And that shift changes everything. Letting go of control doesn't mean letting go of responsibility. It means understanding where your responsibility ends. You are responsible for what you sow, not for when or how the harvest comes. Some seeds grow fast. Some take years. Some don't grow at all because the soil isn't ready. But you still plant with care, with love, with presence. This is the freedom karma offers. The freedom to act from wisdom without being crushed by expectation. The freedom to give fully without needing a return. The freedom to speak your truth without demanding agreement. the freedom to help someone without needing them to change. You begin to realize that every moment is a field of possibility, and your actions are the seeds, not the weather, not the timing, not the outcome, just the seed. This is both humbling and empowering, because while you can't control the world, you can shape your relationship to it. The Buddha taught that karma is not just about outer actions, but also the inner habits of mind, your reactions, your beliefs, your tendencies. If you repeatedly respond to pain with anger, that habit becomes stronger. If you respond with compassion, that grows instead. So karma is not something out there, it's alive in you, shaping who you become through what you choose. And here's something rarely spoken about. The present moment is more powerful than your past karma. No matter what patterns you've repeated, what mistakes you've made, or what you think you deserve, this moment gives you a chance to shift. You are not locked in by your past. You are being invited to wake up now. This isn't spiritual bypassing, it's clarity. The mind wants to assign blame when life hurts. It wants to explain suffering. But karma is not a blame game, it's a mirror. Not to shame you, but to show you the power of awareness. Every moment you choose differently, you create a new path. And this is where real transformation begins, not by controlling every detail of life, but by meeting each moment as it is and acting with clear intention. You stop needing guarantees. You stop trying to predict every turn. You start flowing. Flowing doesn't mean you always like what happens. It means you stop fighting with what is. You stop wrestling the river. You place your energy in the direction of your values, not the outcome. So many people live trapped by their need for control, needing their efforts to pay off, needing others to respond a certain way, needing life to go according to plan. And when it doesn't, they feel punished. But this is only because they've mistaken karma for control. But when you really see karma, you see something else. A quiet confidence begins to rise. You realize that even if the outcome is uncertain, the action still matters. Even if no one notices, the choice to be kind is still powerful. Even if your plans fall apart, the energy you put into them was not wasted. Nothing is wasted in this universe. It all becomes part of the unfolding. And so you start doing what is right, not for reward, but because it aligns you with truth. You give not because you expect, but because giving feels expansive. You forgive not to fix the past, but to free your own heart. You speak honestly, even if your voice shakes, because honesty clears the fog inside you. Letting go of control also frees you from disappointment, because disappointment often isn't about what happened, it's about what you expected to happen. But when you stop tying your peace to outcomes, you start to experience something different: gratitude. Gratitude for the effort, gratitude for the lesson, gratitude for the chance to show up with your full heart, even when things don't go your way. This isn't passive. This isn't giving up. This is a radical shift in how you live. Instead of reacting to life, you participate with it. You co-create without trying to dominate. And this gives you room to breathe. You stop seeing people as obstacles to your peace. You stop viewing mistakes as curses. You stop believing that every difficulty is a punishment. Instead, you begin to see the deeper dance, the way joy and pain, clarity and confusion, effort and surrender all play a part in your unfolding. And the more you understand this, the more you relax. You stop rushing, you stop pushing, you do what needs to be done, then let it go. In Zen, they call this effortless effort. You act wholeheartedly, and then you release. Like a bow and arrow. You pull back with full attention. Then, you let the arrow fly. And once it's released, it's no longer in your hands. This kind of letting go doesn't come from apathy, it comes from trust. Trust not that everything will go the way you want, but that whatever comes, you'll meet it with presence. Karma also teaches us that nothing we do is isolated. Every word you speak has a ripple. Every reaction teaches your nervous system what to expect. Every habit you reinforce builds a pathway in your mind. So even if no one sees what you're doing, you are shaping yourself. This is the sacred responsibility of karma, not to control your life, but to become your life, not to manipulate others, but to stay awake in yourself. You become the kind of person who chooses peace over drama, stillness over chaos, integrity over convenience. And slowly, you start noticing how much energy you used to waste trying to control what you never could, how much pain came from fighting what was already unfolding, how much joy was missed in chasing something else. Now you pause, you act, you let go. And in that letting go, you find relief. This practice doesn't remove hardship, but it makes it lighter, because you're no longer carrying the added burden of needing things to be different. You still feel pain, but it moves through you. You still care deeply, but without clinging. And this gives birth to a new kind of strength, a quiet steadiness. You stop needing life to go your way in order to feel okay. You feel okay because you are aligned with your actions, with your values, with your deeper knowing. There is nothing more peaceful than living this way. It doesn't mean you stop having goals or dreams. It means you stop being a slave to them. You work toward them, yes, but you are no longer defined by whether they happen, because who you become while walking the path is more important than where it leads. And there is something holy about that kind of freedom, the kind that doesn't come from avoiding pain or securing success, but from knowing that no matter what happens, your peace is not held hostage by the outcome. You begin to trust that life is not happening to you, it's happening with you. You listen more, you interfere less, you stop asking, "How can I make this go my way?" and start asking, "What is this teaching me?" You release the need to fix others. You stop trying to control what they think, how they act, or whether they change. You start seeing that your real power lies not in getting them to be different, but in choosing how you show up, whether you meet them with reaction or awareness, judgment or understanding, control or compassion. This doesn't mean you let people harm you. It means you stay rooted even when they don't. You walk away when needed. You say no when necessary, but you do so with clarity, not resentment, with intention, not force. You understand that karma is not a scoreboard, it's a mirror. And when you live honestly, that mirror reflects peace. Everything in this universe moves. Winds change, tides rise and fall, seasons turn, and karma moves too. It's not static, it's not fixed, it's responsive, alive. In every moment, you are contributing to the flow, with your thoughts, with your presence, with your choices. So when you drop the illusion of control, you don't lose power, you reclaim it. You start living from the only place that's real. This moment, not trying to predict it, not trying to shape it, just being fully here, clear in your actions, free in your heart. And in this way, karma becomes not a trap, but a path, not a burden, but a guide, a soft rhythm pulling you back to your center again and again, until your very presence becomes the offering, not because it controls the future, but because it honors the now. When control fades, something else starts to surface, a quieter truth, often buried beneath our need to hold on. You've seen how trying to control outcomes creates tension, how the desire for certainty can lead to exhaustion. But beneath that layer of resistance, there's something deeper we all wrestle with: our relationship to change itself, the part of us that fears endings, that dreads letting go, that panics when things shift. And it's not because we're weak, it's because we've forgotten the nature of all things. We've forgotten impermanence. At the center of Buddhist teaching is one simple but profound truth. Everything changes. Not because we want it to, not because we planned for it, but because change is what life is. This principle is called anicca, and it's not just a concept, it's a lens that changes everything you see. Anicca is not meant to make you feel unstable. It's meant to set you free, because once you stop expecting things to stay the same, you stop feeling betrayed when they don't. That's the real root of anxiety, not just uncertainty, but our deep resistance to it. The fear that what we love will be taken away. The fear that what we depend on might disappear. The fear that no matter how hard we try, we can't freeze time. But when you begin to see clearly, you realize this: nothing has ever stayed the same. Not your body, not your thoughts, not the people around you. Even your emotions, especially, the ones you thought would last forever, have passed like clouds. And yet, here you are, still breathing, still growing, still moving. This is not a loss, it's a kind of wisdom, the kind that doesn't depend on things lasting, but on you learning how to be with them while they're here. Anicca teaches you that change is not the enemy. The resistance to change is, because when something shifts, it doesn't always bring pain, it brings transformation. But if you cling to what was, you miss what's arriving. This doesn't mean you don't care. It doesn't mean you detach or shut down. It means you hold everything with gentleness, like holding water in your hands you don't grip, because gripping only makes it slip faster. You hold lightly, with care, with love, but without fear. This shift can dissolve so much anxiety, because a lot of worry is just trying to make something last, trying to keep the good things close, trying to push the bad things away. But nothing lasts forever, not the joy, not the pain, not even the fear. Everything moves. And when you trust that movement, you don't have to fight it. There's a calm that comes when you stop resisting the current. You begin to flow with life, instead of bracing against it. You accept that some things will leave before you're ready. Some plans will fall apart. Some dreams will fade. But none of that means you've failed. It just means you're alive. You're part of a living world where nothing stands still. This understanding doesn't make grief go away. It makes grief more sacred. You cry because you love. You ache because you care. But you don't drown, because you know the waves come and then they go. In fact, anicca gives you permission to feel fully, knowing that no state is permanent. You can be overwhelmed and still know that the overwhelm will pass. You can be anxious and still hold on to the truth that it won't last forever. This softens your relationship to fear, because fear always whispers, "What if this never ends?" But impermanence answers, "It won't. Nothing ever does." You stop seeing your emotions as problems to solve. You see them as visitors, each with their own message, each with a limited stay. You can learn from them, sit with them, and let them move through. This also changes how you see others. You start appreciating people more, not because they're perfect, but because you know they won't be here forever. Every conversation, every smile, every ordinary moment becomes more precious. You stop waiting for the right time to express love. You realize the right time is now. Anicca also changes your relationship to identity. We cling to who we think we are, our roles, our opinions, our history. But those are shifting too. And trying to stay the same in a world that's always changing only leads to pain. You grow when you allow yourself to evolve, to let go of old versions of you, to step into new ones without needing to explain, justify, or be understood. Letting go doesn't mean losing yourself. It means discovering the parts of you that are deeper than change, the stillness beneath the movement, the awareness behind the thoughts. That's what's steady. Not the outer form, but the space within it. Anicca doesn't mean you shouldn't plan or hope or build. It means you do those things while knowing they may change, and because of that, you value them more. You give your full presence while they last, instead of missing them while they're happening. This changes how you respond to endings, whether it's the end of a season, a chapter, a relationship, or a dream. You no longer see it as a failure, you see it as a turning. Not the end of the story, but the end of a sentence. And after the sentence, something new begins. You can breathe through endings, you can honor them without collapsing. You can even find gratitude for what they taught you, for how they shaped you, for how they prepared you for what's next. And just as things end, things begin. Anika also means new joys will come, new insights, new friendships, new versions of yourself. This brings hope, not the kind tied to wishing, but the kind rooted in trust. Trust in the unfolding, trust in your ability to meet whatever comes. This insight also makes space for forgiveness. When you realize people change, you stop defining them by their worst moment. You leave room for growth, for healing, for something new. And that includes yourself. You're not stuck in your past choices. You're not bound by who you were. You can start again, as many times as needed. Anika is the gentle reminder that this moment will pass, and the next one will come, and all of it is part of your path, even the parts you didn't choose, even the ones you don't yet understand. You begin to live in cycles, not straight lines, breathing in, breathing out, expanding, contracting, gaining, losing, loving, grieving, and through it all, learning how to remain open, not because you enjoy every part of the cycle, but because resisting it doesn't stop it, and accepting it makes you wise. Wisdom, in this sense, isn't knowing how to avoid pain. It's knowing how to hold it without fear. It's learning to let it soften you instead of harden you. It's realizing that just like joy, pain will pass, and both are part of a bigger whole. The more you rest in this understanding, the more resilient you become. Not because you're numbered, because you're no longer shaken by change. You expect it, you move with it. You even welcome it, knowing that it clears space for new growth. And in that space, anxiety starts to lose its grip. You no longer need to predict everything. You no longer panic when things shift. You find something steadier than certainty: trust. Not blind faith, not denial, but trust in your capacity to adapt, trust in your inner grounding, trust that what comes is workable. This doesn't mean you won't feel afraid. It means fear won't run your life. You'll know how to sit with it, breathe with it, let it speak but not lead. Because anxiety thrives on the illusion of permanence. It says, "What if this never ends?" Or, "What if I can't handle this?" But Anika reminds you that nothing stays, and everything transforms, including you. So when life feels too heavy, when you're clinging to something slipping away, pause. Take a breath. Remember, this is movement, this is life, this is Anika. You don't have to hold on so tightly. You don't have to fix what's changing. You don't have to freeze a single moment in time. You are not here to stop the river. You are here to learn how to float, how to dip your hand in the water with reverence, how to let it pass through without trying to catch it. And in that softness, in that surrender, you'll find a kind of peace that doesn't depend on stability, a peace that moves with life instead of against it. This is not the peace of perfect conditions, it's the peace of deep understanding that everything changes, and that's okay. Because you are learning how to stay steady, not by standing still, but by dancing with the rhythm of life itself. Letting go of permanence opens the heart to peace. The tightness around the future begins to loosen, and you begin to trust the movement of life instead of fighting it. But even when we accept that everything changes, suffering still sneaks in through another door. That door is expectation, quiet, often unnoticed. yet powerful enough to shape the way we feel, react, and understand our lives. The mind doesn't just experience the world, it constantly projects onto it. It paints over the present with hopes, fears, assumptions, and beliefs. And often, it's not the world that hurts you, it's our expectations of how the world should be. Expectations build a world in the mind that the world outside often fails to match. This mismatch creates tension. The deeper the expectation, the sharper the pain when it isn't met. You may not realize you're holding on to one until it breaks. You expected someone to understand you. You expected the effort to be returned. You expected progress to be linear. You expected life to follow a certain shape. And when it doesn't, you feel it disappointment, confusion, sometimes even despair. But what if the pain isn't coming from what happened, but from the gap between what happened and what you thought should happen? In Buddhist teachings, this illusion is addressed through the understanding of shunyata, emptiness. This doesn't mean life is meaningless or cold. Emptiness refers to the lack of inherent, fixed nature in all things. Everything, including our expectations, is empty of absolute truth. It exists, but not in the solid, dependable way we want it to. The stories we tell ourselves about how things will go, those are constructions, not facts. Mental formations based on memory, desire, and fear. The mind creates these stories automatically. It uses past experiences and cultural messages to build blueprints. Then it walks into the present moment, expecting those blueprints to match reality. When they don't, suffering arises. And instead of questioning the blueprint, we often judge the reality. We think something went wrong, but what if nothing went wrong? What if the expectation was never solid to begin with? Seeing the emptiness of expectations doesn't mean we stop having preferences. It means we stop mistaking our preferences for guarantees. You can still want kindness, effort, clarity, but you no longer build your peace around receiving them. You learn to meet life as it is, not as you wished it would be. And that shift changes everything. Without expectation, there is openness, a space between stimulus and response. You're no longer reacting from disappointment, you're responding from awareness. You hear someone's words without immediately comparing them to what you hoped they'd say. You see the day unfold without attaching to how you thought it should go. You allow each moment to be what it is, which allows you to be at peace. This isn't passivity, it's clarity. When you release your grip on what you wanted to happen, you can finally see what is happening, and only from there can you move wisely. Expectations often make us blind. We miss what someone is offering because we're too focused on what they're not. We miss what life is giving because it doesn't look the way we imagined. Emptiness removes the filter and lets truth come through. Many arguments in relationships aren't about what was said, they're about what someone expected to hear. Many frustrations in daily life aren't about what happened, they're about what was supposed to happen. We carry these invisible scripts everywhere: how people should behave, how we should feel, how things should unfold. When reality breaks the script, we suffer. But reality is not a script. It's a living, breathing movement. Releasing the script is not giving up, it's waking up. Shunyata helps you see how fragile expectations really are. Not in a hopeless way, but in a liberating one. Because once you see that the mind is projecting, you don't have to believe every projection. You can pause, you can question, you can choose your relationship to the moment instead of letting your conditioning decide for you. This also heals self-expectation. The pressure to be a certain way, perform a certain role, meet an internal standard. Much of our anxiety comes from the expectations we place on ourselves. To always be composed, to always succeed, to never fall short. But even these are mental projections. They aren't who you are. They're ideas the mind formed, often based on comparison, fear, or the need for approval. When you see their emptiness, you create space for compassion. You soften. You become more real. You begin to trust experience over narrative. The felt sense of this moment becomes more valuable than the story about it. You might still notice the mental storyline. It doesn't disappear, but you're no longer caught in it. You see that thoughts are like weather, passing, shifting, empty of inherent weight unless you hold on to them. This doesn't mean life becomes blank or flat. In fact, it becomes richer, because when you're not locked into what you expected, you're free to explore what's actually unfolding. A conversation becomes more meaningful because you're listening, not waiting for a script. A setback becomes more insightful because you're curious, not resentful. A quiet day becomes more beautiful because you're present, not distracted by what should be happening instead. Emptiness doesn't remove meaning, it removes fixation. And in that space, true meaning can arise not from force, but from presence. Letting go of expectations also reduces emotional reactivity. You no longer jump to frustration when things shift. You no longer spiral into blame when someone behaves differently than you hoped. Instead, you pause. You reflect. You recognize that every person is navigating their own internal world filled with their own expectations, wounds, and projections. You stop taking things personally. You see how much of human interaction is shaped by unseen mental habits. This recognition creates compassion, not because you excuse harmful behavior, but because you understand the roots of it. Expectations are rarely met with awareness. They're often unconscious, inherited, unspoken. And when they clash, conflict arises. But when even one person in the dynamic sees the illusion, the whole energy can shift. You become a space of clarity, not cold, not distant, but stable. You listen without defense. You act without needing to control. You speak from presence, not from unmet demands. This also deepens your resilience, because when expectations are seen for what they are, mental formations, you're no longer thrown off balance when they dissolve. You might feel disappointment, yes, but it doesn't control you. It passes, you allow it, and you continue with strength. The beauty of shunyata is that it's not an idea to believe, it's something you can experience directly. In meditation, when thoughts arise and fall, in daily life, when plans shift and you stay calm. In relationships, when you drop the script and meet the other person as they are. With practice, you become more aware of when expectations form. You notice them in real time, that slight tension before a conversation, hoping for a certain response. That hidden disappointment after an outcome, that resistance to the way things unfolded. You start to notice the moment the mind attaches, and in that noticing, you gain freedom. You may still hope, still plan, still desire, but you no longer confuse those movements for reality. You let them be what they are, temporary. Emptiness doesn't deny movement. It simply doesn't cling to it. And that non-clinging is the ground of peace. There's a silent joy that arises when you release the need for things to go a certain way, not because you no longer care, but because you care without attachment. You love with openness. You live with less fear. This openness allows creativity. You respond to the moment as it is, not how it was supposed to be. You become more flexible, more adaptive. You let go of fixed outcomes and become more responsive to what's possible now. Over time, this practice transforms how you meet the unknown. You no longer need to fill in every blank. You no longer panic when plans fall apart. You see that emptiness isn't empty in the painful sense, it's spacious. It holds everything, without clinging, without demand. You begin to trust not what you've imagined, but what life brings, even when it's different, even when it's hard. Because you are no longer trapped in the projection, you are grounded in awareness. That's where suffering starts to dissolve, or not, because life stops being messy, but because you stop trying to force it to match an image. You meet the moment instead of molding it. And the moment becomes more than enough. In this spaciousness, there is healing. The body relaxes, the mind softens. You no longer chase what isn't here, you rest in what is. And from that rest, wisdom grows. This wisdom doesn't need to prove anything. It doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't come with answers. It simply sees clearly. The thoughts in the mind are not the truth. The expectations are not reality. They are clouds. And the sky, the awareness beneath them, is vast and untouched. You begin to live in that sky. You don't fear the clouds, but you don't lose yourself in them either. You watch, you learn, you let go. And as each expectation dissolves, something else arises in its place. Peace. A kind of quiet that doesn't depend on anything happening or changing. A peace that was always here, waiting beneath the noise. You return to it, again and again. Not because you've escaped life, but because you've finally begun to see it as it is, empty of fixed form, full of living presence, whole, even in the unknown. When the mind stops clinging to expectations, what's left is space. Not emptiness as in lack, but space that feels alive, open, and weightless. And in that space, something else begins to call. Not louder, quieter, a whisper behind the noise, a presence that doesn't argue, doesn't explain, doesn't promise, it just is. That presence is silence. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of stillness. And when everything else feels uncertain, that stillness becomes the most stable place to rest. In Buddhist tradition, there is a practice known as noble silence. This isn't just about being quiet, it's about turning away from the constant need to fill space, explain, defend, and perform. It's about choosing presence over performance, awareness over reaction, depth over noise. Noble silence is not silence for the sake of silence. It's silence that carries integrity. It holds weight without words. And it brings the mind into balance in ways that nothing else can. We live in a world filled with voices, not just the ones around us, but the ones inside us, the ones narrating every moment, analyzing every interaction, preparing responses before we've even listened. That mental noise never seems to stop. It's driven by fear, by ego, by the deep need to be heard, seen, and understood. And the more we speak from that place, the more restless we become. Because no amount of expression can calm a mind that hasn't learned how to listen. Noble silence teaches us that not every feeling needs a voice. Not every discomfort needs to be explained. Not every question needs to be answered right away. Some things need space. Some things reveal themselves only in the quiet. When we stop speaking outwardly, we begin to hear inwardly. And what we find there is not always comfortable, but it is always honest. This kind of silence is powerful because it interrupts momentum. The momentum of reaction, of habit, of conditioned patterns. We often speak from a place of defense or restlessness. Silence introduces a pause. And in that pause, the whole direction of the moment can shift. It's in that pause that we choose awareness over instinct. It's in that pause that we realize most of what we wanted to say didn't really need to be said. Silence is not suppression, it's refinement. It doesn't mean you push your feelings down, it means you hold them with care. You allow them to breathe without immediately turning them into sound. You study them. Let them settle. Let them pass through your body before sending them into the world. And when you do speak, the words are cleaner, simpler, more aligned. Noble silence also reveals how much of our speech is rooted in anxiety. We talk to fill gaps, to avoid discomfort, to control the narrative, to be seen as smart, right, or good. But silence exposes the insecurity behind the noise. And once seen, that insecurity begins to loosen its grip. You realize you don't have to prove yourself in every conversation. You don't have to win every argument. You don't have to explain your worth. This frees you, because the energy you spent trying to be heard can now return to you. You don't lose your voice, you reclaim it. It becomes something used with intention, not compulsion. And with that intention comes power. Not the kind that dominates, but the kind that holds presence. The kind of power that doesn't need to shout to be felt. Noble silence also helps you see others more clearly. Without the noise of your own responses filling your mind, you actually hear what people are saying. You hear the spaces between their words, the emotion beneath the story, the truth behind the posture. Real listening begins in silence. And when you listen fully, you respond with depth instead of reaction. That's how connection deepens. Not through more words, but through more presence. This practice also trains the mind to rest. When speech quiets, thought slows. The constant need to comment, analyze, and label begins to fade. You stop being a commentator in your own life and start being a participant, fully here, not distracted by your next reply, not busy rehearsing your story, but grounded in the moment. And that grounding becomes a source of strength. In times of chaos, this inner stillness becomes essential. When the world feels unstable, when circumstances are loud and overwhelming, silence is not withdrawal, it's protection. It's a way of preserving your clarity, your energy, your sanity. While everything else moves, you stay still. While voices rise, you listen. While noise surrounds, you return to your breath, your body, your awareness. This stability doesn't come from resisting the noise, it comes from not needing to join it. You stop being pulled into every conflict. You stop reacting to every opinion. You don't disappear, you become more whole. The world may still demand things from you, but you choose when and how to engage. Not from fear, not from pressure, but from centeredness. Noble silence also gives rise to insight, because in the quiet, truths emerge that cannot be found through words. You begin to notice how much of your suffering is created by thought. How many of your fears are stories. How often your discomfort is magnified by the way you talk about it. Without the echo of speech, these patterns become clearer, and once seen, they can be released. There's a reason the Buddha taught in silence as often as in speech. Some truths are not meant to be spoken, they are meant to be felt, lived, known in the body, in the breath, in the stillness. Silence allows you to descend below the surface and meet yourself without the mask of explanation. That meeting is where healing begins, not in understanding everything, but in resting with it, being with what is, without trying to edit or narrate. You let go of performing peace and actually begin to feel it. Not because everything is resolved, but because you're no longer running from what's unresolved. In noble silence, time stretches. Moments expand. You notice things that would have passed you by. The flicker of light on a wall, the weight of your feet on the floor, the tension in your chest that slowly begins to release. These details are often missed in noise, but they matter. They root you in presence, and presence is what stabilizes the mind. Stability doesn't mean no movement. It means a calm center that isn't swayed by every wave. That center grows in silence. It's not built in dramatic breakthroughs, it's cultivated in subtle attention. Daily practice, pausing before speaking, listening more than explaining, resting instead of reacting. Even short moments of noble silence throughout the day can change your relationship to life. A few quiet breaths before responding. A walk without your phone. A meal eaten without talking. A choice to not fill every space with noise. These small acts reclaim your attention. They remind you that silence is not emptiness, it's a full experience, often richer than sound. You begin to trust silence as a friend, not as something awkward or uncomfortable, but as something sacred. You realize that many of the most powerful moments in life are wordless: a gaze, a pause, a presence. Silence doesn't lack meaning, it holds more meaning than speech can carry. Over time, noble silence becomes not just a practice, but a refuge, a place you return to when the world pulls too hard. Not to hide, but to see clearly, to reset, to remember who you are beneath the noise. That clarity is your anchor, and it's always available if you know how to enter it. You don't need a mountain or a monastery. You don't need perfect conditions. You need only the willingness to be still, to stay with yourself without distraction, to meet the chaos of life with the calm of your own presence. Noble silence is not about becoming silent forever. It's about learning when silence is more powerful than speech. It's about knowing that peace often begins not with fixing the world, but with pausing before you speak about it, listening before you act within it, breathing before you react to it. You begin to live more wisely, speak more carefully, act more intentionally, because the silence within you becomes a guide, a compass pointing you back to balance again and again. And in that balance, the mind no longer spins, the heart no longer races, the breath no longer feels tight. You are still, even when the world isn't. You are present, even when everything else pulls you away. This is the gift of noble silence, a gift not given by the world, but discovered within, a gift you can return to whenever you need it, as close as your next breath, as quiet as your own presence, as powerful as the peace it holds. Silence reveals more than clarity. It reveals the fragile boundary between what is real and what is imagined. In the stillness, you start to notice that what felt solid begins to shimmer, to shift. Thoughts feel like echoes. Feelings rise and fade without clear cause. Reality itself no longer feels as fixed as it once did, and that recognition leads to a deeper question. If life can feel so dreamlike, then what can we truly hold on to? When everything becomes this fluid, how do we find stability not by holding on, but by seeing clearly through the illusion? This is where the teachings of dreams begin to unfold. Not just the dreams you see while asleep, but the nature of dreams themselves, and how they mirror the life you live while awake. Buddhist wisdom often compares ordinary life to a dream, not to dismiss its value, but to point toward its impermanence, its unreliability, and its deeper nature. You begin to see how much of your suffering comes from believing things are more permanent, more fixed, and more personal than they really are. Every night, your mind creates entire worlds in your sleep. People appear, emotions rise, problems feel real. Sometimes you run, sometimes you fight. Sometimes you experience love so intense it moves you to tears. Then you wake up, and none of it existed in the way you thought. The fear disappears, the tension vanishes, the heartbreak dissolves into thin air, the dream ends, and you return to your life. But here's the part often missed. The emotions felt in a dream are real. The reactions are real. The beliefs formed within that world feel completely true until the context is gone. Then they mean nothing. This is the insight that transforms your relationship with waking life. It helps you see how much of your daily experience is shaped not by what's happening, but by how your mind frames it. Just like in a dream, your mind constructs stories throughout the day. You walk into situations already carrying interpretations. You meet people and instantly fill in who they are, based on memory, desire, or fear. You face uncertainty and project possible futures. You experience emotions and assume they must reflect something solid. But when you look closer, you see that none of this is fixed. It's a continuous creation layered with assumptions, fed by memory, constantly shifting. Understanding this can loosen the grip of fear. If life is like a dream, then it's not meant to be controlled. It's meant to be witnessed, not passively, but with curiosity, with presence, with care. This doesn't mean life is meaningless. It means the meaning isn't found in clinging to forms. It's found in seeing clearly the nature of those forms and how your mind relates to them. The more you practice this, the more you begin to observe your own reactions as part of a larger pattern. Anger arises, and instead of fueling it, you watch it pass like a passing scene. Joy comes, and you appreciate it fully, knowing it too will fade. Plans shift, and you don't collapse. You adjust, just as you would in a dream where nothing unfolds the way you expected. And slowly, the fear of not knowing what comes next begins to dissolve, because you no longer need to know to feel safe. This perspective also brings humility. You stop assuming you always understand what's happening. You begin to see how quickly meaning shifts. What felt like failure becomes a turning point. What seemed like loss becomes space for something new. Like waking from one dream into another, you move through layers of experience without grasping. This changes how you treat others. Just like you, they're also walking through their own dream-like reality, reacting based on projections, struggling with illusions, caught in patterns that feel true to them. You don't have to agree with their dream, but you no longer take it personally. This is compassion not rooted in pity, but in shared humanity. In the recognition that we're all trying to wake up in our own way. When you study your dreams, you begin to notice patterns, themes that repeat, symbols that reappear. The same is true in waking life. Certain emotional reactions come up again and again. Certain fears appear in different forms. This shows you where your mind is still holding on, still creating fixed identities, still believing in a story that no longer serves you. But just like you can become lucid in a dream, aware that you're dreaming, you can become lucid in life, aware that your thoughts are not absolute, that your emotions are temporary, that the situations you face are not the final truth. Lucidity gives you space. It helps you respond instead of react. It gives you freedom inside the moment instead of being pulled by it. This doesn't mean disconnecting. In fact, it means connecting more deeply with awareness. You don't drift through life, but walk through it with open eyes, with clarity that comes not from control, but from presence. You stop needing to prove things, stop needing to win every internal argument, stop needing to solve life like a puzzle, because you realize there's nothing missing. There's only this unfolding moment and how you meet it. Meeting life like a dream doesn't make it less important, it makes it more precious, because you understand how rare it is, how quickly it passes. You hold your experiences with reverence, even when they're painful, because you know they won't last. You no longer ask, "How do I make this permanent?" Instead, you ask, "How can I meet this fully while it's here?" Fear of unpredictability softens in this view, because unpredictability is no longer a threat, it's the nature of the dream. You stop waiting for stability to appear outside you. You become the stable one. Not by freezing, but by flowing. Not by knowing everything, but by trusting yourself in the not knowing. This kind of trust grows with practice. You don't force it. You cultivate it by watching how things rise and pass, how the worst moments eventually fade, how the moments you tried to hold on to eventually change, and how through all of it you remained. That you is not your role, your opinion, your history, or your fears. That you is the awareness watching it all. That's the same awareness present in the dream world and the waking world. It never leaves. It doesn't judge. It simply sees. And the more you rest in that awareness, the more grounded you become, even in the face of chaos. Buddhist practice points us back again and again to this seeing. It doesn't ask you to escape your life, but to see it for what it is, a temporary unfolding, a moving picture, beautiful, not because it lasts, but because it doesn't. So when your mind resists change, when fear rises about the unknown, when the future feels too big, pause. Take a breath. Remember the nature of the dream, not to avoid it, but to move through it with clarity. Remember that meaning is not something you control, it's something you discover by letting go of what you thought it should be. This perspective also opens space for playfulness. If life is a dream, then there is room to explore, to express, to take risks without the weight of perfection. You stop carrying the burden of always needing to be right. You let yourself evolve, change direction, be wrong sometimes, laugh at your own seriousness. And in that freedom, creativity arises. You paint the dream not out of fear, but from joy. You speak not to be heard, but to share truth. You connect not to fix anyone, but to be fully here with them. The dream becomes a field for presence, for kindness, for discovery. None of this denies pain. Pain still arises. But your relationship to it changes. You feel it fully, without resistance. And in feeling it, you let it move through. It doesn't define you. It passes like everything else in the dream. And what remains is clarity. This clarity is not sharp or cold. It's soft, spacious. It doesn't grasp. It doesn't defend. It holds everything lightly. And in that lightness, life becomes less of a problem and more of a process. Not something to fix, but something to meet with awareness. The more you live this way, the more awake you feel. Awake not in the sense of having all the answers, but in the sense of being here without needing answers. Awake to the beauty of not knowing. Awake to the joy of being present without control. There is no final conclusion to the dream, no fixed destination, no moment when everything will make perfect sense forever, but there is presence, and that is more than enough. Presence that holds each moment like a passing cloud, presence that returns again and again to breath, to body, to silence. Presence that watches the dream unfold and chooses to walk through it with peace, even when nothing is predictable. You are not here to escape the dream. You are here to wake up within it, to meet it fully, to move through it lightly, and to remember again and again that even in its uncertainty, this life is worth living with, your eyes open and your heart free. Seeing life as a dream softens the sharp edges of control. You stop gripping for permanence and start relaxing into the moment as it is. But even as you welcome the unfolding with presence, there are spaces that feel longer, heavier, more uncertain. These are the waiting places. The moments when you've done all you can, and now all that's left is time, time that moves slowly, outcomes that haven't revealed themselves, change that hasn't yet arrived. In those moments, peace often feels furthest away. But these moments are not empty. They hold a different kind of wisdom, the wisdom of waiting. In Buddhist teachings, this strength is called khanti. It is not just the ability to endure discomfort, it is the quiet power to stay open when nothing is resolved. To hold steady in the presence of what is incomplete, it is patience, not as passive delay, but as an active, aware relationship with time. Waiting becomes suffering when we resist it, when we treat it as wasted space, when we believe peace can only begin once something changes. But patience transforms waiting into practice. It turns time into a teacher, not because we enjoy delay, but because we meet it differently. We begin to see that the discomfort in waiting does not come from time itself, but from how the mind wants to speed past it. Khanti helps you notice this. It brings attention to the moment between desire and fulfillment, between question and answer, between effort and outcome. And it invites you to stay, to breathe, to feel what's present without needing it to be different. In that staying, something begins to shift. You discover that the tension you were trying to escape becomes less solid. That anxiety, when met with patience, begins to loosen. That restlessness, when not fueled by resistance, begins to settle. This is not the patience of tolerance or forced endurance. It is a patience rooted in presence, in understanding that all things unfold according to their own rhythm, not your timeline. You see this in nature. No tree rushes its growth. No season comes early just because you wish it would. The sun doesn't rise faster because someone is waiting for morning. Life moves at its own pace. And when you align yourself with that pace, you suffer less. You begin to trust that waiting is not empty. It is a part of the path. Trust is essential here, because without it, patience turns into resentment. But with trust, patience becomes a practice of openness. You begin to trust that clarity will come, that what is meant for you will arrive in time, that forcing something before it's ready doesn't bring peace, it brings friction. This trust also helps you let go of needing to rush your own growth. So often we pressure ourselves to heal faster, to figure things out, to move on. But transformation cannot be hurried. Insight comes when the mind is ripe. Letting go happens when the heart is ready. Kanti invites you to stop pushing, to let yourself grow at the pace of truth, not ego. Patience also helps you stay connected during challenge. When life brings pain or uncertainty, the instinct may be to escape, to numb, to distract. But patience says, stay with this, not forever, just now. And when you do, you find that presence is stronger than fear, that your capacity to hold difficulty is greater than you thought. You don't have to fix the moment. You just have to be in it fully. This strength deepens your relationship with emotion, especially the ones that feel unbearable. Sadness, anger, fear, these often escalate because we try to push them away. But when you meet them with patience, they begin to shift. You don't drown in them, you listen to them. You allow them to rise, move, and pass. Patience turns emotion into energy that can flow, not walls that trap you. In relationships, Kanti is essential. People don't always meet your needs right away. They may not understand your words, your timing, your feelings. Patience gives space for others to be human. It allows conversations to unfold without pressure. It gives people the time they need to grow, just as you need time yourself. This doesn't mean tolerating harm. It means not forcing change before it's time. Patience is also the foundation for deeper wisdom. When the mind slows down, it sees more. Quick conclusions often miss what is subtle. But when you wait, when you observe, you begin to see beneath the surface. You notice patterns. You recognize the layers of thought. You witness your own tendencies with compassion instead of criticism. Waiting becomes meditation, a time of still seeing, not inactive, but inwardly active. You notice the shifts in your breath, the tension in your shoulders, the thoughts that pass without needing to be believed. You are no longer trapped in time, you are awake in it. Kanti also helps you deal with failure. When things don't go as planned, when effort doesn't lead to success, patience gives you room to reflect instead of collapse. You stop expecting immediate results and begin to appreciate the slow rhythm of learning. You see that what seems like delay may actually be preparation. That what feels like being stuck is often the ground where strength takes root. This patience becomes a source of deep resilience, because you no longer fall apart when answers don't come quickly. You no longer panic when the path is unclear. You remain, not because nothing moves you, but because your center is rooted in something deeper than speed. And in a world obsessed with fast results, this kind of patience is radical. It refuses to chase. It refuses to perform urgency. It refuses to treat presence as a luxury. It treats stillness as a necessity, not just for healing, but for truth. Khanti doesn't mean waiting forever. It means knowing when action is wise and when stillness is wiser. It means being honest about when the urge to move comes from fear and when it comes from clarity. This discernment only grows through practice, through pausing, through staying with discomfort long enough to hear what it's really saying. There's a softness in this practice, not weakness softness that is grounded, aware, and strong. A softness that doesn't react out of pressure, but chooses response from a place of presence. This is not passivity. It's wisdom in action. Choosing stillness not because you're afraid, but because rushing would break something sacred. You begin to recognize the moments when doing nothing is actually doing the most. When stepping back allows a deeper understanding. When being still allows the storm to pass without pulling you into it. Patience doesn't mean losing time, it means making space for the right time to arrive. This reshapes how you live. You stop measuring your days by how much you accomplish. You begin to value the depth of your attention, the steadiness of your presence, the kindness in your pauses. You stop rushing through your own life. You begin to live it with care. This care extends to how you move through uncertainty. Khanti doesn't remove the unknown, but it removes the panic around it. You learn to sit with questions, to carry them without needing immediate answers. You begin to trust the rhythm of clarity that it will come, not through force, but through time and readiness. The space of not knowing becomes less threatening. Because you are no longer empty in that space, you are fully present in it. You are not waiting as absence, you are waiting as attention, as calm, as breath. And in that attention, you grow, without needing to rush, without needing to force, simply by staying, listening, allowing the next step to come when it's ready. This changes your experience of progress. You begin to see that growth doesn't always look like forward motion. Sometimes it's stillness. Sometimes it's waiting. Sometimes it's breaking apart and resting in the space before reforming. Patience lets you remain whole in the pauses. It lets you breathe when others rush. It lets you listen when others interrupt. It lets you return to stillness when everything calls for reaction. And slowly, this becomes your way. A path of less urgency, a path of steadier wisdom, a life that honors the natural unfolding of things. Because you are no longer pushing the river, you are learning to stand by its edge, to listen, to feel its current, and to step in only when the time is right. And when you live this way, even waiting becomes sacred. Even stillness becomes strength. Even silence becomes wisdom. You are no longer racing to escape time. You are moving with it, patiently, fully. Here, waiting teaches stillness, and in stillness, time opens. You no longer demand answers to appear on your schedule. You begin to see the wisdom in allowing, in not rushing toward outcomes, in trusting what unfolds. But even in the deepest patience, one truth remains quietly present beneath it all. The truth that, no matter how long we wait, how much we build, how deeply we love everything, eventually ends. This is not a threat. It is not meant to create fear. It is an invitation. An invitation to wake up fully, to align with what truly matters, to remember what is real. That invitation is called Marana Sati, mindfulness of death. To contemplate death is not morbid, it is honest. And honesty, when met with presence, brings freedom. Death is not a failure of life, it is part of life. Avoiding this truth doesn't protect us, it leaves us unprepared, both practically and emotionally. When we avoid death, we avoid depth. We remain on the surface, clinging to distraction, chasing security in things that will never last. But when we turn toward death not with fear, but with awareness, we begin to live differently. Marana Sati asks us to remember that this life is brief, not to frighten us, but to help us see clearly. Because when you understand that you won't be here forever, priorities shift. The small irritations that once consumed you lose their grip. The grudges you've held feel heavier than before. The time you've spent waiting for perfect conditions feels more precious. Everything becomes more immediate, more honest. This awareness doesn't mean you detach from life. It means you engage more fully with it. Knowing that this moment is passing, you stop wasting it. You show up. You say what matters. You let people in. You listen more carefully, love more openly, live more consciously. Because there is no guarantee that another moment will come. Marana Sati is not just an idea, it is a practice. A turning of attention toward the reality that this body, this breath, this life is impermanent. You begin to reflect, gently but consistently, that death is certain, and the time of death is uncertain. This is not meant to create anxiety, it's meant to cut through illusion. Illusion tells you there's always time, that someday is guaranteed, that your plans are secure. But truth tells a different story, one that liberates. When you live with the awareness of death, you stop postponing. You stop treating life as a rehearsal. You begin to act from presence instead of habit. This doesn't mean constant intensity. It means clarity. You no longer waste energy on what doesn't matter. You don't need to win every argument. You don't need to prove your point. You don't need to fix everything. Because you realize the preciousness of what you have and you protect your peace. Death contemplation also softens fear. Because often what we fear is not death itself, but the unknown, the lack of control, the sense that everything will be taken from us. But when you look closer, you realize that every day holds a kind of dying. The end of yesterday, the breath that passed, the identity you no longer carry, and you're still here, still breathing, still able to meet the next moment with awareness. By facing death in meditation, you gradually remove the power it holds over you. You begin to see that it is not an enemy to be avoided, but a teacher to be heard. It strips away pretense. It shows you what you truly value. It asks you what kind of person you want to be not someday. But now, this practice doesn't encourage despair. It invites presence. You start asking different questions. Not, what do I have to do? But, what do I truly want to give? Not, what do I need to achieve? But, what do I want to leave behind? These are not abstract reflections. They shape your behavior, your choices, your relationships. When you meet life with this kind of clarity, your mind becomes lighter, because you stop carrying the weight of pretending things will always stay the same. You stop grasping at control. You stop postponing peace. You begin to see that most of what keeps you stuck is based on the illusion that there's always more time. But when time is seen as limited, everything changes. This shift brings depth to even ordinary moments. A meal becomes sacred. A conversation becomes meaningful. Silence becomes nourishing, because you are no longer moving through life asleep. You are awake to the miracle that you're here at all. Marana Sati also teaches humility. You begin to understand that no matter how much you do, how much you gather, how much you achieve, it all ends. And instead of that realization making you feel hopeless, it makes you more gentle. You stop measuring your worth by what you accomplish. You begin to live from alignment, not ambition. You act not to impress, but to express what matters most. This helps with letting go of attachments, identities, expectations, because if you know you'll leave everything eventually, you stop clinging so tightly. This doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care with clarity. You love people without trying to possess them. You pursue goals without being crushed by them. You move through change with more ease. And when loss does command, it always does, you are more prepared. Not in the sense of being untouched, but in the sense of being rooted. You've already practiced facing impermanence. You've already trained your mind to stay open. So even when grief arises, even when the heart breaks, you are not lost. You can hold the pain with presence. You can feel it without drowning in it. This kind of strength is not cold or detached. It is soft and steady. It is the strength of someone who knows what they cannot control and no longer resists it. Someone who chooses love anyway. Someone who keeps showing up, even knowing that nothing lasts. Someone who honors every goodbye by living every hello more fully. Meditating on death also brings gratitude, not the forced kind, but the quiet recognition that nothing is owed. Every breath is a gift. Every sunrise is a blessing. Every relationship is a miracle of timing. You don't have to pretend to feel grateful. You just see clearly how precious it all is. And this gratitude turns into responsibility, not heavy, but heartfelt. You realize that your time matters, your presence matters, how you speak to others matters. The energy you bring into the world matters, because it may be the last thing you offer, and so you offer it with care. This awareness also brings simplicity. You stop needing so much, you stop chasing so much. You begin to refine your life not by making it smaller, but by making it clearer. You ask yourself what you truly need, what truly nourishes you, what truly connects you, and you let the rest go. There's a deep peace that arises from this, because you are no longer fighting the nature of life. You are no longer building a fortress against change. You are living in rhythm with reality. And in that rhythm, you find freedom, not from death, but through it. You begin to understand that death is not the opposite of life, it is the completion of it. It is what gives meaning to everything that comes before. And when you stop running from it, you start living more courageously. You stop holding back. You speak more honestly. You love more fiercely. You forgive more easily. This forgiveness includes yourself. You stop waiting to be perfect. You stop carrying shame from the past. You recognize that your time is limited and that wasting it in self-hatred is not noble. You soften. You make peace with who you are now, and that peace becomes your ground. You carry that ground into every part of your life, into your work, your relationships, your inner world. You move through stress with more perspective, through difficulty with more grace, through the unknown with more calm, because death no longer terrifies you, it teaches you. And that teaching doesn't end. It deepens over time. As you age, as you lose people, as you change. Maranasati is not something you do once, it is something you return to. Not to create fear, but to remember truth, to stay aligned, to live from the heart, not from the noise. And the more you live this way, the more your presence begins to change the world around you. Not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily. Others feel your calm, your sincerity, your depth. They begin to see that you are not escaping life, you are embracing it with full awareness. This is the gift of death contemplation. It doesn't take life from you, it gives it back. Real, unfiltered, precious, whole. You are not here forever, but while you are here, you can be fully alive, fully awake, fully in tune with what matters. And when your final breath comes, whenever it may be, you will meet it not as a stranger, but as an old companion, not with fear, but with honesty, with openness, with the same presence you brought to every moment before it. When death is no longer pushed away, something profound begins to settle. A sense of presence sharpens. The weight of what truly matters rises to the surface. The small complaints lose their grip. In the light of mortality, life becomes unmistakably sacred. But even with this clarity, there is still a question that lingers beneath the surface. If everything ends, if nothing stays, what holds this world together? If life is so unpredictable, so chaotic, Why does anything at all make sense? This is where the teaching of pratityasamutpada enters, not as a concept to memorize, but as a way of seeing. Often translated as dependent origination or dependent co-arising, it offers a direct answer to that question. Nothing arises on its own. Nothing stands alone. Everything that appears depends on something else. Every moment, every emotion, every experience is the result of countless conditions, visible and invisible. This truth does not simplify life, it expands it. It invites you to see beyond the surface, to notice that what feels random may not be, that what appears to come out of nowhere often carries the echoes of past conditions. When you understand this, chaos doesn't disappear, but it starts to make sense. You begin to see patterns, not because the world is controlled, but because it is connected. Deeply, constantly, invisibly connected. This view removes the need to find a single cause for anything. It breaks apart the illusion that things just happen, or that you alone are the source of your pain or joy. A feeling, a decision, a thought each is born not in isolation, but in a web of causes. Your upbringing, your environment, your previous actions, even the mood of the people around you, all of these shape what arises in you. This helps you step out of blame, whether directed at yourself or others. Blame often comes from a shallow view. You see the tip of the iceberg, not the ocean beneath it. Dependent origination doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it explains it. It reveals that behind every action is a chain of conditions. And the moment you see this, your response changes. You move from reaction to inquiry, from judgment to understanding. This understanding is powerful when facing your own emotions. When anger arises, instead of labeling yourself as bad or wrong, you ask what gave rise to it, what fed it, what allowed it to take root. Perhaps it's exhaustion, perhaps an old wound, perhaps unmet needs from years ago. The anger itself is not the problem, it's the result. And when you see the conditions, you can begin to shift them. The same is true for fear, sadness, confusion. These states are not final truths. They are expressions of a moment shaped by what came before. They are signals, not definitions. And when you learn to see them as temporary patterns, not permanent identities, you stop feeling stuck in them. You begin to hold them with gentleness, with curiosity, with care. This also changes how you approach your healing. You stop looking for one fix, one method, one breakthrough. Instead, you look for conditions. You ask what supports clarity, what supports balance, what supports ease, and you begin to offer those conditions to yourself slowly, patiently, without pressure. Healing becomes less about solving and more about tending, less about control and more about connection. You no longer see yourself as broken, but as someone shaped by causes, now learning to shape new ones. And in this way, your growth becomes continuous, not linear, but layered, not dramatic, but deep. Dependent origination also shifts how you respond to the chaos of the world. News, conflict, disaster, these can feel overwhelming, as if everything is falling apart. But when you see how conditions create outcomes, you begin to see that chaos is not the absence of order. It is complex order. Unpredictable not because it is meaningless, but because it involves more moving parts than the mind can hold at once. This helps you stay grounded when life doesn't go according to plan. You no longer ask, "Why is this happening to me?" as if the universe singled you out. You ask, "What are the conditions at play?" And with that question, you shift from victimhood to inquiry, from helplessness to wisdom. It becomes clear that unpredictability does not mean disorder. It means interconnection. You begin to see that every moment carries the seeds of many others, that how you speak, how you breathe, how you treat yourself, these create ripples. Some you will see, many you won't. but they move outward all the same. This awareness gives meaning to your smallest choices. Even when the results aren't immediate, you trust that something is forming, that every moment of kindness, every act of mindfulness, every breath taken in awareness becomes part of the larger flow. You stop needing instant proof. You start living from understanding. And this understanding brings responsibility not as a burden, but as a natural response. You realize that your life is not separate from others, that your presence matters, that your choices matter. You begin to care more, not because someone told you to, but because you feel the truth of your impact. Not grand, but real. This dissolves the illusion of isolation. Often, suffering deepens when you believe you are alone in it, that your pain is unique, that no one can understand. But when you see the network of causes, you understand that suffering is shared, that your fears, your struggles, your longing, they come from universal conditions, and that recognition opens the heart. Compassion grows from this, not as a concept, but as a natural response. You feel the pain of others, not as something separate from you, but as part of the same web. And instead of turning away, you reach out, with presence, with patience, with real care. This also invites humility. You stop needing to take credit for every success, because you see all the conditions that made it possible, the people who supported you, the experiences that shaped you, the chance moments that came together, and from that humility, gratitude grows. Gratitude not just for what's pleasant, but for everything that allowed you to be here, even the hard parts, even the moments that felt like failure, because each one contributed, each one played a part. And when things don't go your way, when plans break or outcomes shift, you don't collapse, you adapt, because you understand that no single condition defines the whole. You allow room for change. You make space for the unknown. You begin to live in harmony with the unfolding, rather than resisting it. This does not mean you lose direction. It means your direction becomes wiser, more attuned, less rigid. You stop forcing outcomes. You start responding to the moment with clarity, with presence, with skill. Over time, this way of living changes your nervous system. Your mind becomes less reactive, less desperate for control. You begin to rest in the flow of cause and effect, not as something cold or mechanical, but as something alive, something you are part of, something that can be trusted, even when it surprises you. And in that trust, you find peace not in knowing everything, but in understanding the nature of everything, that nothing comes from nowhere, that everything is connected, that you are never separate from the whole. This brings you home, not to certainty, but to the beauty of interdependence, to the quiet strength of living in alignment with how things actually are. You walk through life not untouched by chaos, but unshaken by it. Not because everything is predictable, but because you are no longer lost in the illusion that it should be. You are learning to see through the patterns, to feel the current, to move with it instead of against it. And in that movement, you find balance, you find presence, you find the wisdom that has been waiting in every moment all along. Seeing the pattern behind chaos does not eliminate uncertainty, but it changes how you hold it. You stop needing everything to unfold on your timeline. You stop believing discomfort means something has gone wrong. You begin to see that life moves in ways far more intricate than the mind can predict. But even in the presence of that understanding, another layer often surfaces that many hide, one that few speak openly about. Doubt. Not just doubt in decisions or outcomes, but doubt in the path itself. Doubt in your understanding. Doubt in the truth you thought you knew. This kind of doubt has a name in Buddhist teachings, vicikiccha. Often misunderstood, it is not always an obstacle. It is not something to silence or shame. It is something to meet with awareness. Because when approached mindfully, doubt becomes one of the most powerful doors to wisdom. At first glance, doubt feels like weakness. It feels like a threat to faith, a sign of instability. But this is only when you believe that certainty is the goal. When you believe that strength means never questioning, never hesitating, never wondering. In truth, the strongest minds are not those that never doubt. They are the ones that doubt skillfully. Mindful doubt is different from confusion. It is not scattered or frantic. It is focused. It is rooted in curiosity. It is the willingness to ask questions, not to disprove, but to understand more deeply. It does not seek to tear down, it seeks to uncover. In this way, vicikicca becomes a tool. It pushes you to investigate, to not settle for surface answers, to go beyond borrowed beliefs and find what is true in your own experience. Not what comforts you, but what aligns with what you've seen directly. This kind of inquiry requires courage, because comfort often comes from inherited views. But wisdom comes from testing those views against life itself. When doubt arises, the common response is to push it away, to feel guilty for questioning, to fear that doubt means failure. But when you suppress doubt, it doesn't disappear, it hides. It grows underneath. It creates distance between what you say and what you feel, and that distance creates disconnection. Mindful practice invites the opposite approach. Bring the doubt into the light. Look at it without fear. Ask what it is pointing toward. Sometimes doubt arises because something is unclear. Sometimes because something has shifted in you. Sometimes because what once served you no longer fits. In each case, the doubt is not your enemy. It is your signal. It is your path forward. When held with awareness, doubt becomes a mirror. It shows you where you are clinging, where you are pretending to know what you don't, where you are following out of habit, not understanding. It reveals what still needs to be examined, not so you can abandon the path, but so you can walk it with integrity. This is especially important in spiritual life. It is easy to become attached to ideas, teachings, even identities that once brought comfort. But the purpose of any teaching is not to become a new belief system, it is to bring you back to direct experience. And doubt, when honored, keeps you honest. It keeps your practice alive. A path that does not allow doubt becomes rigid. It loses the flexibility needed for growth. Just as the body stiffens when held too tightly, the mind stiffens when it is not allowed to question. Inquiry keeps the mind healthy. It opens space for new insight. It brings freshness to your understanding. Engaging with doubt does not mean throwing everything away. It means sitting with uncertainty without rushing to resolve it. It means allowing the discomfort to exist while continuing to observe, reflect, and stay grounded in practice. You keep showing up, not because you are sure of everything, but because you are committed to truth even when it asks you to sit with silence. This kind of strength grows over time. You begin to see doubt as part of the process, not a break from it. Like clouds in the sky, it comes and goes. It does not block the path, it reveals where more attention is needed. When doubt is held gently, it also teaches humility. It reminds you that there is always more to learn, always more to unlearn. That knowledge is not a possession, it is a living, evolving relationship with experience. You stop needing to appear wise. You start needing to be real. This honesty deepens connection with others and with yourself. You no longer pretend to know what you don't. You stop offering empty reassurances. You speak from what is true in you, even when that truth is, I don't know yet. And that not knowing becomes a sacred space, not a failure. In fact, many of the greatest shifts in practice come from doubt, not from abandoning the path, but from questioning deeply enough that you find what truly resonates. What once was followed automatically becomes chosen deliberately. And in that choice, your practice becomes yours, not a repetition of someone else's words, but a living expression of what you have seen. Doubt can also protect you from false certainty, from clinging to views that no longer serve, from building your sense of self around beliefs that don't match your experience. It reminds you to check in, to pause, to ask again, is this true for me now? This doesn't make your practice weaker, it makes it more honest. And honesty is what builds real confidence, not the confidence of always being right, but the confidence of being willing to look closely, to stay present, to learn. Doubt also helps dismantle spiritual ego, the part of the mind that wants to be seen as awakened, wise, above it all. Doubt cuts through that story. It humbles, it grounds. It brings you back to the place of beginner's mind, the place where true learning begins. You begin to appreciate the questions more than the answers, because answers change, they evolve as you grow. But the willingness to question remains a steady companion, a guide that keeps your heart open and your mind clear. This is especially important when teachings seem contradictory, when different paths offer different methods, when your own inner shifts bring new insights that challenge old assumptions. In those moments, doubt helps you pause, not to freeze, but to look deeper, to feel your way forward with presence. And in that pause, something quiet emerges. Not the voice of panic, but the voice of discernment. A calm, steady sense that knows how to listen. Not just to teachings, but to your own direct knowing, to the felt truth that lives beneath concept. This discernment is not dramatic. It does not shout. It whispers. It moves slowly. It respects complexity. It trusts the unfolding. And it is strengthened, not weakened, by doubt. Because what you discover through doubt becomes deeply rooted, not borrowed, but embodied. Not repeated, but realized. This is how wisdom grows, not through certainty, but through depth. Through returning again and again to what feels real in this moment. And so, when doubt arises, you don't push it away. You meet it. You sit with it. You listen. You ask, what are you showing me? You follow the thread, not to destroy, but to clarify. And you hold the process with care. Over time, this changes your relationship to truth. Truth stops being a conclusion. It becomes a path. A way of being that is alive, flexible, and open. A way that honors both knowing and not knowing. Both clarity and confusion. Both faith and inquiry. You become less afraid of being wrong, less attached to needing certainty, more willing to live in the unfolding, to meet life as it is, with a mind that is strong enough to doubt without collapsing, open enough to question without fear, committed enough to stay with the process, even when answers take time. And in that staying, something deeper than answers appears. A kind of clarity that is felt more than known, a groundedness that is not shaken by surface changes, a peace that holds both the question and the silence that follows. This is the wisdom born of doubt, not the kind that shouts from mountaintops, but the kind that walks quietly through the forest, listening, learning, and never assuming it has reached the end. Because the end is not what matters. What matters is how you walk. And mindful doubt helps you walk with truth, with integrity, with heart. The moment you learn to meet doubt with honesty, something opens. You no longer hide from uncertainty, you welcome it as part of the journey. The walls that kept your understanding narrow begin to loosen. But even in this openness, another illusion waits quietly in the background. One so deeply woven into how we live, think, and speak that we rarely see it at all. It is the belief in a fixed self, a permanent identity that must be protected, improved, and preserved. Letting go of that belief isn't just a philosophical idea, it is a direct path to freedom. In the Buddha's teaching, this insight is called anatta, often translated as not self. It doesn't mean that you don't exist or that your life doesn't matter. It means that what you call self is not what it seems. It is not a solid, unchanging entity. It is a process shifting, adapting, dependent on conditions. Your thoughts, emotions, memories, habits, and perceptions, they arise and pass. None of them stay. None of them define you completely. At first, this truth can feel strange. If there's no fixed self, then what is experiencing this life? What continues from moment to moment? But look closer. When you feel anger, who are you in that moment? When you feel calm later, where did that angry self go? When you change your mind, who is changing? These questions are not puzzles to be solved. They are invitations to look deeper into your experience. Start with the body. You say, my body, but every cell in it is changing constantly. The body you had 10 years ago is not the one you live in now. Still, you feel continuous. But that continuity is not proof of a fixed self. It is the result of memory, attention, and identification. It is a story, and stories can shift. The same is true for your mind. Thoughts come and go, some contradict each other. You may think one way today and completely differently tomorrow. Feelings change, desires change. Even your sense of identity shifts depending on where you are, who you're with, and what you're doing. If you observe carefully, you'll see that what you call me is more like a dance than a statue. This insight can feel unsettling at first, because so much of our effort goes into building and defending the idea of self. We create roles, identities, narratives. We tell ourselves who we are and who we are not. We try to be consistent. We cling to personality traits, careers, and labels. But all of this clinging creates tension. We suffer not because we lack a self, but because we believe we must keep reinforcing one. Anatta is not about losing who you are. It is about being free from who you think you have to be. When you see that there is no fixed self to protect, defend, or fix, so much pressure falls away. You stop needing to prove yourself. You stop reacting to every challenge to your identity. You become more fluid, more open, more responsive. This does not make you empty in the negative sense. It makes you full of possibility. You are no longer trapped in one version of yourself. You can adapt, evolve, learn. You can meet each moment freshly, without dragging the weight of your history behind you. You can let go of old stories because you no longer believe they are you. This also softens the fear of the future. Much of that fear is rooted in the question, what will happen to me? But when there is no fixed me, that fear starts to dissolve. You begin to see that what moves into the future is not a solid self, but a stream of experience. Just as you are not who you were, you will not be who you are now. This truth frees you from needing to control the future perfectly. You stop needing everything to go a certain way to protect your identity. This insight also transforms your relationships. When you no longer see yourself as fixed, you stop needing to fix others. You allow people to change just as you change. You stop holding them to old versions of themselves. You stop expecting consistency from what is naturally fluid. And from this space, deeper connection becomes possible. Not connection between masks, but between open awarenesses. Even conflict begins to shift. So often, arguments are really collisions of identities, each person defending their view of themselves. But when that view is seen as empty, the tension softens. You can listen more fully. You can let go of being right. You can meet others without needing to be someone specific in their eyes. Anatta also helps you relate differently to pain. When something difficult arises, you often say, "This is happening to me." And in that moment, you suffer not just from the pain, but from the belief in the me being attacked. But when you observe closely, you see the pain is arising in awareness. It is not attacking a solid self. It is a process moving, changing, eventually passing. And the awareness it arises in remains unchanged. This shift from identification to observation is powerful. It allows you to be with experience without being trapped by it. You feel emotions fully, but you no longer mistake them for who you are. You see thoughts clearly, but you no longer believe you must obey them. This space brings freedom, not because nothing affects you, but because you are no longer caught in every passing form. And this includes joy. Joy, too, becomes lighter when it's not clung to. You enjoy the present without trying to preserve it. You appreciate beauty without needing it to define your value. You become more playful, more generous, more at ease. Because there's no self-image to maintain, no identity to protect. This lightness is not disconnection. It is presence without burden. You are here, fully alive, without the weight of constantly needing to be someone. And in that space, something deeper is felt. Not a new identity, but a quiet presence. Awareness itself. The one who sees without being limited by what is seen. Over time, this understanding changes how you make choices. You no longer act from a fixed identity. You act from what feels wise, kind, and aligned in this moment. You are no longer loyal to an old version of yourself. You allow growth, even when it means surprising yourself. You become honest about when a role no longer fits. You let go of paths that once felt right but no longer do, and you trust that nothing essential is being lost. This also supports healing, because many wounds are wounds to identity, times when you were told you were not enough, times when your sense of self was rejected. But when the self is seen as not solid, those wounds begin to lose their grip. They no longer define you. They no longer trap you. You begin to relate to your history with compassion, but without being bound by it. And you relate to others' pain the same way. You no longer see people as just their stories. You recognize the impermanence in them too. You stop labeling others based on a single action. You stop assuming people cannot change. Because you have seen how much you yourself can shift, you hold space for others to do the same. Anatta is not something to believe, it is something to see, to feel, to realize slowly, gently, through observation, through questioning, through presence. You don't have to force anything. Just keep watching, keep noticing the impermanence, keep feeling the openness in every moment when the idea of me is quiet. Eventually, you start to live from that place more and more. You speak from awareness, not ego. You love from freedom, not fear. You serve from compassion, not identity. You walk through the world without needing to be someone special because presence is already enough. And when challenges arise, you are not thrown off course. You respond, adjust, adapt, because you are not tied to a fixed position. You move with the conditions, like water finding its way. This is not weakness, it is profound strength, the strength of not needing solidity to feel whole. Living without a self does not make you disappear. It allows the true nature of awareness to shine. The one who sees, feels, moves, loves not as a name, a role, or a shape, but as a living presence that cannot be broken. The more you trust this presence, the more peace you feel. Not because everything is perfect, but because you are no longer struggling to hold a self together. You are no longer afraid of becoming someone else, because you were never just one thing to begin with. You are no longer terrified of change, because you see that change is what you are. And in that seeing, you are free, not lost, not empty, but full of space, of clarity, of the quiet joy that arises when there is nothing left to protect, only this breath, this awareness, this life, fully alive in every unfolding moment. Letting go of the fixed self does not leave you empty. It reveals what has always been flowing beneath the illusion of identity, a quiet, observing awareness. Once the burden of being someone specific begins to dissolve, a new kind of space opens. In that space, the world looks different. You are not above it. You are not separate from it. You are deeply within it. But now you're looking with new eyes. The same life, the same patterns, the same cycles, but what once looked like repetition, you now see as possibility. What once felt like a trap now starts to look like a path. This is the deeper understanding of samsara, not as a punishment or mistake, but as a field of learning, a constantly turning wheel of birth and death, joy and pain, clarity and confusion. In early stages of spiritual reflection, samsara is often seen as something to escape. It's described as the cycle of suffering, the endless wandering. But when you look more closely, when you stop reacting and start observing, you begin to see that within the cycle itself is everything needed for awakening. There is no separate realm where you go to grow. You grow here, in this human life, in this fragile body, in this messy, beautiful, unpredictable experience. Samsara is not separate from the path, it is the path. And the idea that we must leave this world to find freedom begins to soften. Instead, you start to find freedom in how you meet it. What makes samsara feel like a trap is not the world itself. It's the habits of mind that cling, grasp, fear and push. The mind craves control. It craves permanence. When those cravings are unmet, suffering arises. But when those cravings are seen clearly, they begin to lose their power, and suddenly samsara becomes a mirror. It reflects back all the places you are still holding tightly. It shows you what still asks for your attention, your care, your transformation. Every moment in samsara is a teaching. When you experience joy, you are being taught about impermanence and gratitude. When you meet pain, you are learning about compassion and resilience. When you get lost in confusion, you are being invited to pause, to return, to look more deeply. Nothing is wasted. Even the most difficult experiences carry the potential for insight. Not because they are pleasant, but because they are real. This view changes everything. You stop wishing for a different life. You stop waiting for some perfect peace to arrive. You begin to meet your life as it is. And in doing so, you begin to understand the power of meeting experience fully. The ordinary becomes sacred. The repeated patterns become invitations. The obstacles become your teachers. Instead of trying to escape the cycle, you begin to move through it with wisdom. You pay attention to your reactions. You observe the conditions that lead to suffering. You notice when you are pulled by desire, when you are driven by fear, when you are caught in delusion. And you do this not with judgment, but with awareness, with kindness, with honesty. You realize that samsara is not static. It shifts based on how you relate to it. A painful situation met with resistance deepens suffering. The same situation met with presence becomes the ground for growth. The circumstances might not change, but your experience of them does. And this is where transformation begins, not by avoiding life, but by entering it fully. The practice becomes one of engagement, not escape. You engage with your body, not as something to transcend, but as something to care for. You engage with others, not to fix them, but to understand them. You engage with your emotions, not to get rid of them, but to learn from them. Everything becomes part of the path. Even repetition has meaning. You may see the same habits arise again and again, the same thoughts, the same struggles, but each time they appear, they carry a new chance to meet them differently, to respond instead of react, to see more clearly. This is not failure. This is refinement. Samsara teaches through cycles, through the slow unfolding of insight. It also teaches humility, because you realize how easy it is to fall back into patterns, how strong the habits of clinging and aversion can be. But this does not make you weak, it makes you human. And the more compassion you bring to your own process, the more compassion you are able to offer others. This also allows you to stop performing progress. You don't need to appear enlightened. You don't need to suppress difficulty in order to seem spiritual. You begin to trust that growth often happens in quiet ways, through small shifts in attention, through moments of pause, through choosing not to follow an old reaction. And this trust deepens your presence. You stop rushing to fix yourself. You start listening more to your breath, to the energy of the moment, to the subtle movements of the mind. In this listening, samsara becomes less of a storm and more of a conversation. You begin to hear what life is asking of you, where it's guiding you, what it's trying to show you. The teachings don't just come through meditation or scripture, they come through the challenges of daily life, through traffic and illness, through relationships and responsibilities. The path is everywhere. And when you recognize this, you stop dividing your life into sacred and ordinary. It all becomes sacred, because it is all arising in awareness, and awareness is what transforms it. Even your past becomes part of the path. Regrets, mistakes, old pain, these are not barriers. They are teachers, each one offering insight into the human condition, into the habits of mind that create suffering, into the compassion that comes from knowing suffering deeply. You begin to see that no moment is separate from the path. There is no break in practice, no moment off the clock. But this is not a burden, it is a liberation. Because it means you don't have to wait for anything. You don't have to wait for better conditions, for more time, for more clarity. You start here, now, with whatever is present. And in starting here, you begin to move with the rhythm of life. You stop fighting what is. You stop needing things to be different. You learn to meet the flow of birth and death, gain and loss, joy and sorrow, with a mind that is steady and kind. Samsara does not promise comfort, but it offers truth. And when you walk in truth, even discomfort becomes meaningful, even pain becomes workable, even confusion becomes the ground for deeper clarity. This is not romanticizing suffering. It is refusing to waste it. It is recognizing that everything can be part of your awakening, that nothing needs to be thrown away, that your practice is not separate from your life. It is your life, seen clearly, met fully, held with care. And in this seeing, samsara becomes more than a cyclete, becomes a spiral. You don't just repeat the same patterns, you revisit them with more awareness, more compassion, more wisdom. Each turn deepens your insight. Each step grounds your freedom. Eventually, you begin to see that the escape from samsara was never out there. It was always in how you relate to this moment. When you meet life without clinging, when you respond without resistance, when you rest in awareness instead of identity, samsara shifts. It loses its grip. It becomes the teacher that points you home, over and over again, until the path is not a place you go, but a way you live, fully awake here. When you begin to walk through samsara with presence, something shifts inside you. You stop looking for an exit and start paying attention to the moment in front of you. The patterns you once tried to escape become doorways. Your relationship with discomfort becomes less reactive. Insight arises not from separation but from contact. But even in this unfolding, there remains a quiet need beneath it, all the need for stability, not as control, but as something to lean into when the path feels unclear. And that need, leads you to one of the most misunderstood aspects of the journey: faith. In Buddhist teachings, this is known as saddha, often translated as faith, but not in the way most people use the word. This is not blind belief, not loyalty to dogma, not following without question. It is a deep, inner confidence rooted in personal experience. It is the trust that arises from having seen the path work, not because someone told you, but because you have walked it and felt it for yourself. Saddha does not begin as certainty. It begins as a quiet willingness, a leaning forward, a soft voice inside that says, "This feels true." You test it, you try it. You watch your own mind, your own reactions, your own patterns, and slowly, as you continue, trust starts to grow. Not trust in an idea, but in the process, in the unfolding, in your capacity to meet it all with awareness. This is why saddha is not passive. It is not hoping things will go your way. It is not waiting for someone to fix everything. It is active engagement. It is choosing to stay with the practice, even when results are not immediate. It is planting seeds without seeing the tree. It is returning to the breath, even when the mind wants to wander. It is choosing presence, even when discomfort calls you away. Faith without belief means you don't need to force certainty. You are allowed to not know. You are allowed to question. And still you move forward. You keep practicing. You keep observing. You stay with the process not because you are sure of the destination, but because you trust the steps. And in trusting the steps, you discover the path. This kind of faith becomes even more important in uncertain times, when the world feels unstable, when plans fall apart, when the future offers no answers. In those moments, belief may collapse. Ideas may fail, but saddha remains, because it is not built on opinion, it is built on clarity, on the understanding that no matter what happens externally, you can return inward, you can be present, you can respond with care. Saddha is also what helps you continue when progress is slow, when you feel stuck, when the insights don't come, when the meditation feels dull. You don't push through blindly. You listen, you adjust, you rest. But you do not abandon the path. You remain steady, not out of obligation, but out of trust that even this is part of the unfolding. This steadiness is what gives faith its quiet strength. It is not emotional hype. It is not inspired by promises. It is grounded in experience. You know that presence helps because you have felt it. You know that clinging brings suffering because you have seen it. You don't need to debate. You don't need to convince. You simply return to what works. And because it is experiential, saddha does not require you to believe in things you haven't seen. It allows you to hold teachings gently, to explore them, to question them, to see how they live in your own heart and mind. It invites you to stay open, not because you're afraid of being wrong, but because you value truth more than certainty. This openness allows your understanding to evolve. You may begin with one view and later see it more clearly, more deeply, more accurately. Saddha supports that growth. It does not need fixed conclusions. It trusts the unfolding. It allows you to live the questions, knowing that clarity comes not always as answers, but as deepened presence. It also supports humility. You stop needing to act like you've figured it all out. You become more comfortable saying, "I don't know yet." More willing to admit when you've misunderstood. More able to listen without defensiveness. Because your confidence is not in your opinions. It is in your ability to stay awake, to keep looking, to keep growing. This kind of faith nourishes patience. It understands that awakening is not a race. That insight comes in layers. That transformation is subtle. Saddha lets you be where you are, without rushing forward or clinging to the past. It honors the present as enough, not because it is perfect, but because it is real. And when challenges arise, Sada becomes your anchor. When doubt returns, when emotions overwhelm, when plans fail, faith without belief brings you back. Not with dramatic declarations, but with quiet steadiness. You pause, you feel, you breathe, you return to what you know helps. And from that place, the storm may continue, but you are no longer lost in it. This is why Sada is not dependent on external validation. It does not need others to agree. It does not require the world to reflect it back, because it lives in your own heart, in your own knowing, in the way your breath feels when you are fully here, in the peace that comes not from things going right, but from being fully present with what is. It also protects you from spiritual performance, from needing to seem enlightened, from pretending you're further along than you are. Sada invites you to be honest, to show up as you are, to let the process be real. It reminds you that depth matters more than appearance, that presence matters more than perfection. Over time, this faith becomes woven into your way of being. It's not something you carry like an object. It becomes how you move, how you respond, how you listen. It becomes the silence beneath your words, the stillness behind your actions, the clarity that remains when confusion fades. And in this way, it becomes contagious, not through preaching, but through presence. Others feel it in the way you stay grounded, in the way you speak gently, in the way you meet difficulty with steadiness. You don't need to convince anyone. You simply live it. This kind of faith is what carries you through uncertainty without needing control. It gives you permission to walk through, not knowing, not as a failure, but as part of the path. It lets you sit in silence without needing to fill it. It helps you continue practicing even when everything else feels unstable. Because you trust the ground beneath your feet, not because it never shakes, but because you have learned how to stand on it. And that ground is not made of beliefs. It is made of presence, of attention, of insight gathered over time. It is made of your own experience, the places where you touched peace and recognized it, the moments when awareness opened and you saw something clearly for the first time. Those moments may be brief, but they are real, and they become your foundation. This is the quiet confidence of Sada, a faith that doesn't close the mind but opens the heart, that doesn't demand answers but values the journey, that doesn't offer escape but deepens engagement. It is not a belief that replaces fear. It is a trust that holds fear with compassion, that lets you walk forward even when the path ahead is not clear. Faith without belief is a living trust in your own capacity to meet life as it is, not with blind certainty, but with deep presence, not with fixed conclusions, but with a willingness to keep listening, to keep learning, to keep returning to the truth that is not found in someone else's words, but in your own direct seeing. This is the kind of faith that carries you not out of the world, but deeper into it, with your eyes open, your heart steady, and your steps grounded in what you know, not because someone told you, but because you have lived it, because you continue to live it, one breath, one moment, one honest return at a time. When faith no longer depends on belief, you begin to stand on something real, not promises, not perfect outcomes, but direct experience. You realize you don't have to see the whole path, you only need to keep stepping with awareness. That awareness becomes your companion, your compass, your quiet strength. But there are still days when the future feels too wide, when your thoughts move faster than your breath, when your body holds tension that the mind cannot soften. In those moments, it helps to stop thinking and start walking. Walking meditation offers not a way out, but a way in, into the body, into the present, into the only place where peace has ever lived. This is not ordinary walking. It's not about exercise or arriving somewhere. It's about connecting your steps to awareness, again and again, until movement itself becomes medicine. You begin by slowing down, not just your pace, but your attention. You bring awareness to the contact of your foot with the ground. You notice the shift of weight, the movement of muscles, the quiet rhythm of forward motion. There is no goal. There is just the next step. And in that simplicity, the mind starts to settle. This settling doesn't always happen right away. The mind may still race, thoughts may still pull at your attention. That's okay. You keep walking. You keep returning to your step. You treat each footfall as a homecoming. Not dramatic, just steady, just real. The future may still be uncertain, but in this moment, your body is here. The earth is beneath you. The breath moves in and out. There is ground to stand on, even when your plans dissolve. And that ground is your anchor. Walking meditation trains you to meet change without panic. Each step is different. The terrain may shift, the path may curve, but you don't need to know what comes next. You only need to feel this step, this moment, this contact with the present. And when you trust that, the unknown becomes less threatening. Because groundedness doesn't come from controlling the future, it comes from feeling your feet in the present. It comes from meeting each moment with full presence, with body, mind, and breath all in the same place. This kind of walking doesn't require silence or solitude. It can happen in a room, on a street, in a garden. It's not about location, it's about attention. You walk not to go somewhere, but to wake up where you are. Each step becomes a declaration. I am here. I am breathing. I am alive. And when emotions rise, as they often do, you keep walking. You don't push them away. You don't analyze them. You let them move through you, as your feet move beneath you. Sadness may come. Anxiety may linger, but you are no longer frozen. You are in motion, in presence, in practice. Over time, this walking becomes a rhythm that calms the nervous system. The body remembers that it is safe. That movement can be gentle. That grounding is not in thinking, but in sensing, in touching the earth with care, in allowing the body to lead when the mind feels lost. This practice also sharpens attention. When you walk mindfully, you begin to notice the smallest details, the texture of the path, the movement of the wind, the sound of your breath. These are not distractions, they are invitations to come back, to open up, to let the world remind you that you belong to it. You belong even when you don't know what's next. You belong even when everything feels unclear. You belong step by step without needing to have it all figured out. Walking meditation is a powerful way to meet uncertainty because it teaches you to move with it, not to fight it, not to freeze in fear, but to take the next step, whatever it is, with awareness, with steadiness, with trust. You don't have to walk perfectly. You don't have to feel peaceful. You simply walk as you are, with what you feel, and let the body do what it knows how to do. Movement becomes a reminder that nothing is stuck, that no emotion, no thought, no situation lasts forever. The practice doesn't ask you to be calm. It asks you to be honest, to feel your feet on the ground, even when your heart is heavy, to keep walking, even when your mind tells you it's useless. Each step becomes an act of courage, of presence, of returning to what is real. And as you walk, you begin to realize that you are not alone. The earth is with you, the breath is with you, life is with you, not in the form of certainty, but in the form of support, in the form of gravity, sensation, rhythm. You start to feel how the body holds wisdom, the mind forgets. The body doesn't need a plan, it only needs attention. It moves, adjusts, balances. It doesn't know the future, and it doesn't need to. It only knows how to take the next step. This becomes your path, not a fixed direction, but a way of relating, a way of meeting the moment as it is, a way of moving through not knowing with grace. You walk not to reach a destination, but to deepen connection with your breath, with the earth, with the present moment. You walk to feel alive in your own body again. To remember that even when things fall apart, you are still here. You can still move. You can still begin again. Walking meditation teaches you that stability is not about standing still. It's about learning how to move with awareness, how to shift without being shaken, how to stay grounded even as the path changes beneath you. This kind of grounding builds over time. Each step lays a foundation, not of ideas, but of experience. You learn to trust your ability to return, to feel, to respond. This trust becomes your guide, not in the form of answers, but in the form of presence. And in this presence, even fear starts to soften, not because it disappears, but because you are no longer running from it. You are walking with it. You are breathing with it. You are letting it move without letting it lead. You don't need to understand everything to keep going. You don't need to be certain to stay present. You only need to keep walking, keep noticing, keep returning. This is how you learn to live inside the unknown, not by escaping it, but by stepping into it, one breath, one step, one moment at a time. And each step becomes a reminder. You are enough, just as you are. You are not late. You are not lost. You are walking through life with awareness, and that is more than enough. That is the path. That is the practice. That is the way forward, steady, grounded, awake. The practice of walking meditation teaches you to stay grounded in motion, to meet uncertainty with steady presence, one step at a time. You begin to understand that peace is not found by standing still, but by learning how to move with care. And as you walk deeper into the unknown, something else begins to arise, something larger than personal clarity or individual peace. A quiet calling toward others, a natural impulse to reach out. Because once you learn how to stay present with your own discomfort, you start to notice the pain around you with new eyes. Compassion begins to wake up, and with it, a new kind of path unfolds, rooted in bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is not just an intention to help others. It is the deep aspiration to awaken not only for your own freedom, but for the benefit of all beings. It is the shift from inner practice to shared purpose, from personal transformation to collective care. This shift is not about abandoning your own growth. It is about realizing that real growth includes others, that your liberation is tied to theirs, that your wisdom, if it stays private, remains incomplete. Serving others in uncertain times is not always easy. Chaos makes everyone look inward. Fear narrows attention. Stress limits perspective. But bodhicitta asks you to open anyway. Not perfectly, not with grand gestures, but in whatever ways you can, with the people you see, in the space you already occupy, with the pain you already understand. This kind of compassion does not come from obligation, it comes from connection. You begin to see how much others are suffering, not from a distance, but up close. You notice how similar their fears are to yours, how fragile everyone feels beneath the surface, how much people long to be seen, heard, and met with kindness. Bodhicitta arises when your heart touches that truth and chooses to respond, not with pity, but with presence, not with solutions, but with sincere care. It is the quiet decision to stay open when others are closing down, to be a source of steadiness in someone else's storm, to offer warmth in a world that can feel cold. In chaotic times, this kind of compassion brings clarity, because when everything feels unstable, your attention can scatter. But when you care for someone else, even in a small way, you come back to what matters. You find meaning not by solving every problem, but by being available for one moment of kindness, one gesture, one act of listening. This creates direction. It gives you a reason to rise, to return, to keep going. Not because life is easy, but because love is possible. Compassion becomes your compass, not as a concept, but as a way of living. It informs your choices, shapes your words, grounds your actions, even when the future is unclear. Serving others does not mean losing yourself. True compassion includes boundaries. It respects your limits. It honors your needs. But it also reminds you that your energy, your presence, your attention, these can ease suffering. Not for everyone, not all at once, but for someone. And that is enough. This path is not always comfortable. Sometimes it brings you into contact with pain you'd rather avoid. It asks you to witness sorrow, to hold space for grief, to stand beside someone in their confusion. But in doing so, your own capacity grows. You learn to stay steady not just for yourself, but for someone else. And that steadiness becomes part of your strength. Bodhicitta does not require perfection. It begins wherever you are. It is born each time you choose compassion instead of indifference, each time you pause before reacting, each time you extend care instead of criticism. These small acts matter. They ripple outward, even if you never see the full impact. Over time, this way of being changes how you relate to everything. You no longer measure progress by what you gain, but by how much you give. You no longer ask only, "What do I need?" but also, "How can I help?" This does not mean forgetting yourself. It means remembering that you are part of something bigger. Even your own pain becomes useful. It becomes the bridge that helps you understand others, the wound that becomes wisdom, the loneliness that turns into empathy. You begin to see that nothing in your experience has to be wasted. It can all be part of how you serve. Serving others also teaches you how to listen, truly listen, without fixing, without advising, without turning the attention back to yourself, just listening with your whole presence. That kind of listening is rare and deeply healing. It tells someone they matter, that they're not alone, that their voice deserves space. In times of uncertainty, this is a powerful offering. You may not be able to change the world, but you can change the moment. You can be the person who doesn't look away, who meets others with respect, who shows up not because it's easy, but because it's real. Bodhicitta also transforms your view of struggle. Instead of seeing others' pain as overwhelming, you begin to see it as shared humanity. Instead of turning away, you step closer. Not because you have all the answers, but because presence itself can be medicine. A calm voice, a patient pause, a warm smile. These are not small things. In the right moment, they are everything. And this doesn't only happen in dramatic situations. It happens in daily life. How you treat the person who serves your food, how you speak to someone who's tired, how you respond when someone makes a mistake. Each interaction is an opportunity to practice compassion, to choose gentleness, to be a source of steadiness. Serving others in uncertainty also builds resilience. When your energy is focused only on yourself, every discomfort feels larger, every fear feels closer. But when your heart expands to include others, perspective returns. You are reminded that you are not alone in your challenges, that everyone is navigating difficulty, that kindness is still possible in the middle of it. This does not deny your pain, it puts it in context. It helps you hold your suffering without collapsing into it. It gives you the strength to keep going, not just for yourself, but for those around you, for the people who may not have the tools you have, for the ones whose burdens are invisible. Bodhicitta is not about saving the world. It is about showing up for it, with sincerity, with humility, with a willingness to keep the heart open even when it hurts. It is about recognizing that the smallest acts, when done with love, carry great meaning, and it grows as you use it. The more you practice compassion, the more natural it becomes. The more you remember others in your practice, the more stable your own path becomes. Because you are no longer practicing just for relief, you are practicing for connection, for service, for love. This shift creates joy, a joy not based on comfort, but on clarity, a joy that comes from knowing you are aligned with something true, that your presence matters, that your actions, however small, are part of a larger healing. And this joy is not fleeting. It stays with you, even in difficulty, because it is not dependent on success or outcome. It is rooted in the act of offering, in the intention to care, in the quiet, consistent return to compassion. Bodhicitta does not make life easier, but it makes life meaningful. It transforms chaos into opportunity, not opportunity for control, but for love, for connection, for depth. And this depth holds you when everything else feels unsteady. Serving others becomes not just something you do, but a way you live, a way you think, a way you breathe. And in that way, even uncertainty becomes sacred. Not because it is pleasant, but because it invites you to grow, to open, to remember the simple truth that in a world of confusion, compassion is always a clear response. This is the path of bodhicitta, not a destination, but a direction, not a concept, but a way of being, rooted in love, grounded in presence, carried out step by step, moment by moment, in a world that needs your care now more than ever. When the heart opens to others through compassion, something becomes undeniably clear. The path is no longer just about personal peace. It becomes a commitment to show up for the world, even when it hurts, even when it's hard. This sense of shared humanity brings a deep sense of meaning, but it also reveals a tension. You want to help, to serve, to act, and yet life keeps shifting in ways you can't control. You feel the weight of uncertainty, the pressure of wanting to make a difference, and the fatigue of carrying too much. In this space, a quiet question arises. How do you keep going without burning out? How do you move with strength, but also let go? This is where the teaching of virya energy, or wise effort, meets the power of surrender. At first glance, these two seem like opposites. Effort sounds like doing, pushing, striving. Surrender sounds like letting go, yielding, resting. One is movement, the other is stillness. But on the path of inner transformation, they are not in conflict. They are partners. Together, they form the rhythm of a life lived in balance. Effort without surrender becomes force. You push forward, clinging to results. You measure your progress with impatience. You act from fear of failure rather than clarity of purpose. Over time, this kind of effort leads to exhaustion. It burns through your energy without nourishing your heart. It disconnects you from presence because you're always trying to arrive somewhere else. On the other hand, surrender without effort becomes passivity. You wait for change but take no steps. You use acceptance as an excuse to avoid discomfort. You speak of letting go but avoid responsibility. This kind of surrender removes you from the process. It disconnects you from your own capacity to grow, to contribute, to engage with life as it is. The practice is learning how to hold both, to act without attachment, to care without clinging, to move forward with all your heart, while releasing the need to control where it leads. This is not a halfway point between extremes. It is a full engagement with both. Wise effort is rooted in intention, not intensity. It's not about doing more, but doing what aligns with truth. In Buddhist practice, virya is one of the qualities that supports awakening. It is not brute strength. It is perseverance rooted in clarity. It is the willingness to keep returning to presence, to keep meeting the moment with honesty, to keep cultivating the conditions for insight to arise. And it is sustained not by force, but by remembering why you walk the path at all. This kind of effort is deeply connected to purpose. You don't push because you should, you engage because it matters. You act not to earn worth, but to express what you value. And when that purpose is remembered, even small actions become meaningful. Even moments of rest become part of the path, because they are chosen with awareness. Surrender supports this by softening the edges of effort. It reminds you that you are not in charge of outcomes, that growth does not unfold on your timeline, that others will not always respond the way you hope. Surrender lets you offer your presence, your work, your care, then release the result into the larger flow of causes and conditions. This does not mean you become indifferent. It means you act fully and let go fully. You keep doing what's needed without becoming bound by what should happen. In this way, effort becomes light, not because it is easy, but because it is free from the heaviness of expectation. This balance is especially important when facing the unknown. The future cannot be predicted, control cannot be guaranteed, but you can still choose how you meet this moment. You can still bring your energy into presence, into kindness, into clear action. Even when the path ahead is unclear, your effort can be grounded in the now. And this groundedness is what gives effort its power. When you act from clarity, you do not scatter your energy. You focus it. You apply it where it matters most. You let go of what's out of your hands. You stop wasting effort on controlling things that cannot be controlled. This frees you to rest, to pause, to recover. Surrender creates the space where effort is renewed. It lets you acknowledge your limits. It helps you step back when needed, not as failure, but as part of rhythm. Without surrender, rest feels like defeat. But with surrender, rest becomes wisdom. Effort and surrender are not steps taken one after the other. They move together, like breath and body, like walking and balance. One supports the other. When you push, you return to letting go. When you feel passive, you return to engagement. Over time, this movement becomes intuitive, a kind of inner dance that helps you stay aligned even when life doesn't cooperate. This approach also changes how you relate to your goals. Instead of chasing results, you return to process. Instead of needing everything to go right, you ask, "Am I showing up with presence?" This question becomes your compass. It replaces pressure with purpose. It helps you remember that your effort is part of the path, not proof of your worth. In times of difficulty, this balance becomes even more important. Challenges can make you want to try harder, to push through pain, to fix everything quickly. But sometimes, the wisest effort is to pause, to breathe, to feel what is happening before taking another step. Surrender helps you stay honest about where you are, not where you think you should be. And when effort does arise, it comes from love, not fear, from care, not compulsion, from choice, not obligation. This makes your energy sustainable. It allows you to keep showing up not in short bursts, but over the long journey. This balance also influences how you relate to others. You no longer try to control their path. You offer what you can, then step back. You give space for others to grow in their own time. You trust that effort cannot be forced upon someone else, it can only be modeled. And surrender teaches you how to release the need for people to change on your terms. This makes your presence more spacious, more compassionate, more patient. You no longer see others as projects. You see them as fellow travelers, each moving through their own lessons, their own timing. Your role is to bring care, not control. The same applies to your relationship with inner work. You may want to grow quickly, to reach insight, to heal completely. But inner transformation does not respond to urgency. It moves in cycles, in layers, in quiet shifts that can't be rushed. Effort brings you to the cushion, the practice, the moment. Surrender allows the unfolding to happen without judgment. And when both are present, practice deepens. You show up consistently. You stay with discomfort. You return again and again to the breath, the body, the silence. Not because you're chasing results, but because you trust the path. You trust that effort matters, and that letting go does too. This trust creates resilience. You become less shaken by failure, less obsessed with perfection, more able to keep going, even when progress is invisible. You begin to understand that the path is not about reaching a destination H, it's about how you walk it. And how you walk it is shaped by this paradox. You try, and you release. You care, and you let be. You move forward, and you pause. This is the balance that allows you to meet life with poise, not by solving it, but by living it fully. Effort without struggle, surrender without collapse, movement with grace, stillness with strength. These are not concepts, they are lived truths. Cultivated slowly, relearned often, felt in the body, seen in the breath, carried in the way you meet each day. In the end, you stop asking whether to act or let go. You start listening for what is needed now, and then you offer your energy with clarity. Then you release the outcome with trust, and that is enough. Not because it's easy, but because it's true, because it keeps you honest, because it keeps you awake, because it brings you back to presence again and again, where the path is always waiting. Balancing effort with surrender teaches you to move through life with presence instead of pressure. You stop forcing outcomes and start acting from clarity. You let go of the idea that growth must look a certain way and instead trust the unfolding moment. But even with that balance, the human mind still tries to take charge. It wants guarantees. It craves predictability, and just when you think you've understood the path, it starts trying to control the path itself. This is where something unexpected becomes essential humor, not as escape, but as insight, not as distraction, but as relief from the illusion of control. Spiritual humor in Buddhist tradition isn't about jokes for entertainment. It's about the deep smile that arises when you see clearly how the mind clings, how it builds elaborate stories to feel secure, how it tries to bend the world to its will and fails again and again. Humor steps in not to mock, but to soften, to help you laugh at your own seriousness, to let go of the tight grip you didn't even realize you were holding. Laughter becomes a kind of wisdom. It loosens the edges of identity. It deflates the inflated sense of self that thinks it has to manage everything. It points gently to the absurdity of pretending you're in control of what was never yours to command. The weather changes, people change, thoughts come and go, life unfolds on its own terms. And when you stop fighting that truth, what's left is not despair, it's relief. And often, that relief comes with a smile. This smile is not dismissive. It's not about ignoring suffering. It's about not adding unnecessary heaviness to it. It's about noticing how often your own expectations become your burden. You thought everything should go according to plan, and it didn't. Again. You believed you should always be calm, and you weren't. Again. In those moments, instead of tightening into judgment, you learn to loosen into laughter. You say, there it is again, the mind trying to control the ocean. That recognition changes your relationship to difficulty. You stop being shocked by it. You stop taking it as a personal failure. You start seeing how normal it is to fall into patterns and how freeing it is to notice them without shame. Humor allows you to stay on the path without getting stuck in the perfection trap. Buddhist teachers often use humor to break through rigidity. A master might respond to a complex philosophical question with silence, or a simple word, or a wink. Not to avoid the question, but to cut through the thinking mind. To remind the student that awakening is not found in control, it's found in letting go. This type of humor is direct. It meets the moment. It holds a mirror to your effort and asks, "What are you really doing here?" It doesn't insult, it disarms. It helps you step back and see the whole picture. You thought you were advancing spiritually, but you were just reinforcing your ego in more subtle ways. You thought you had let go, but you were still gripping the idea of having let go. Humor makes this visible, not to shame you, but to wake you up. Laughter also connects you with others. When you can laugh at yourself, you become more relatable. You stop needing to appear wise all the time. You stop pretending to have it all together. This honesty creates space. Others feel safe around you because you've stopped performing. You're not trying to be the perfect practitioner. You're just showing up, flaws and all, with a little lightness. And this lightness is healing. When you take everything personally, every mistake feels huge, every setback feels final. But when you meet these moments with humor, you create room to begin again. You don't collapse into failure. You say, "Ah, the mind strikes again," and keep walking. Humor becomes a way to recover, to return, to re-engage with the path. This is especially helpful when facing the illusion of control. The mind wants things to go its way. It wants other people to behave a certain way. It wants the body to stay young. It wants every day of practice to feel peaceful. But none of that happens reliably. And when it doesn't, the mind creates more tension, unless you see the pattern. Unless you're able to laugh at how predictable the mind really is. Buddhist humor invites you to befriend your own conditioning, not by analyzing it endlessly, but by seeing through it with kindness. You start to recognize that you're not the only one who tries to control life. Everyone does. You're not the only one who forgets what matters. Everyone does. And that shared human foolishness becomes a doorway to compassion. You don't need to be ashamed of your attachments. You just need to notice them. And when you do, you can smile, not because they're gone, but because you're no longer trapped inside them. Humor becomes a form of mindfulness, a gentle, playful awareness that doesn't take everything so seriously. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care without clinging. You act without rigidity. You speak with sincerity, not performance. You stop needing every conversation to go perfectly. You stop needing to appear composed when you're falling apart inside. Humor teaches you that real strength is being able to laugh while you grow. It also helps you navigate spiritual practice without turning it into a new identity. You don't need to be the calmest person in the room. You don't need to walk like a monk or speak in soft tones to be present. You don't need to prove your understanding through your appearance. These are games the ego plays. Humor sees through them. Some of the most awakened beings in history were deeply playful. They laughed often, they teased students, they refused to be placed on pedestals, because they knew the truth is simple and the mind makes it complicated. They knew that when people laugh, their guard drops, and in that openness, real insight can land. You can bring this into your own life in small ways. Notice when you're trying too hard, when you're performing instead of practicing, when you're resisting what is, and just smile. Say, "There I go again." That small laugh softens the grip. It invites you back into the present, not as punishment, but as relief. Even in the middle of hardship, there can be moments of lightness, a strange thought, a realization of how much energy you're spending trying to manage the unmanageable. A sudden glimpse of how funny the mind is when it takes itself too seriously. These are not distractions, they are part of the practice. You don't need to force this humor. It's not about pretending everything's fine. It's about allowing the natural absurdity of being human to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be included in the path. The more you accept it, the more whole you become. In truth, the illusion of control is not just a mental habit, it's a cultural one. You're taught to have answers, to plan everything, to always appear composed. But life doesn't cooperate. It breaks your plans, it surprises you, it humbles you, and when it does, you have a choice: tighten up or laugh. Choosing to laugh doesn't make the pain go away, but it gives you space to feel it without drowning. It gives you perspective. It reminds you that you are not the first or the last to be confused by life, that we're all fumbling our way through, trying to do our best, and in that shared imperfection, there's beauty. This beauty grows when you learn to see your thoughts with humor. You catch the mind spinning stories and say, "Nice try." You notice the impulse to fix everything and whisper, "There it is again." You don't fight the mind, you observe it with a light heart. And in that observation, freedom grows. You don't escape life through humor, you enter it more fully. You see its messiness, its contradictions, its unpredictability, and instead of needing to solve it all, you begin to participate with joy, with humility, with the kind of presence that doesn't need to hold everything together. In the end, spiritual humor is a form of wisdom. It doesn't mock suffering, it softens resistance, it makes space for honesty. It helps you walk the path without the heaviness of needing to get it all right. It reminds you that being human is weird, beautiful, confusing, and worth smiling about. So the next time you notice yourself trying to control what cannot be controlled, pause, breathe, smile, let the tension loosen, let the moment be exactly as it is. And maybe, if the timing is right, let yourself laugh just a little. Not because everything is easy, but because you're starting to see clearly. Because you're beginning to feel light in the middle of all this being human. And that too is awakening. Learning to laugh at the illusion of control brings unexpected lightness, not because life becomes easier, but because you stop gripping it so tightly. Humor cracks the shell of seriousness and reveals a softer way of seeing, a way that includes imperfection, contradiction, and even confusion without turning away. You begin to understand that you don't need to master life to be at peace with it, but beneath even the laughter, something more still calls for your attention. A quiet truth waits patiently in the background, a truth that does not bend to hope or humor, the truth of impermanence, of loss, of endings. This is where the 5 remembrances begin to speak. These contemplations are not meant to frighten or depress. They are reminders not of what might happen, but of what will. They call you to look clearly, without denial. They teach you to walk toward the unknown with eyes open and heart steady, not because you have answers, but because you are ready to meet what is real. The first remembrance is, "I am of the nature to grow old." There is no way to escape growing old. This truth invites you to release the belief that you will always be as you are. Youth fades, the body changes. Energy softens, strength returns in different forms. This is not a flaw in the system, it is the system. When you embrace aging as natural, you stop treating it like a failure. You begin to meet it with respect, with tenderness, with understanding that the value of life does not diminish with age, it deepens. This truth is often resisted in cultures obsessed with productivity and appearance. But resisting it does not stop it. It only adds stress. The more you accept the movement of time, the more peace you find in each stage. You stop racing, you stop fighting what is inevitable. And in that surrender, a new kind of wisdom opens, the wisdom that comes from fully inhabiting the body as it is now. The second remembrance is, "I am of the nature to have ill health." There is no way to escape having ill health. The body is not a machine you control. It is a living, breathing process, always changing, always responding to conditions. Health is precious, but it is not guaranteed. When it fades, your value does not fade with it. When pain comes, it does not mean something is wrong with you. It means the body is doing what bodies do. This remembrance helps you relate to illness differently. Instead of seeing it as a betrayal, you see it as part of the path, a call to rest, a chance to listen, a way of understanding impermanence more intimately. And through that understanding, you become more compassionate to yourself and to those who suffer. The third remembrance is, I am of the nature to die. There is no way to escape death. This is the most direct of the five, and often the most difficult to hold. Death is not a future event, it is a present truth. Every breath carries the possibility of being the last. And far from being morbid, this awareness brings clarity. It strips away the non-essential. It shows you what truly matters. You begin to live not in fear of death, but in relationship with it. You speak more honestly. You forgive more quickly. You waste less time. Because you know that nothing is promised. Not tomorrow, not even the next hour. And when you know this deeply, life becomes brighter, sharper, more sacred. This remembrance also prepares you for the losses that will come. You cannot protect yourself from grief, but you can learn how to meet it, how to open to it, how to walk with it instead of trying to run. Knowing that death is part of life does not remove the pain, but it helps you stay present when it arrives. The fourth remembrance is, all that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature to change. There is no way to escape being separated from them. This is perhaps the hardest truth of all, that everything and everyone you love will one day leave or be left behind. But it is also the one that brings the deepest tenderness, because when you know this, you stop taking people for granted. You stop waiting to say what needs to be said. You stop assuming that love can be delayed. Instead, you begin to cherish the now. You hold hands a little longer. You listen more fully. You look at someone's face and realize that this moment will never happen again. Not in exactly this way. And from that awareness, gratitude arises. Not because you're clinging tighter, but because you are fully awake to what is here. This remembrance also helps you soften expectations. People change. Relationships shift. Holding on too tightly causes suffering. But when you accept the fluid nature of love, you become more generous with it. You offer your heart freely, knowing that the time you share is a gift, not a possession. The fifth remembrance is, my actions are my only true belongings. I cannot escape the consequences of my actions. My actions are the ground upon which I stand. This final truth brings you back to responsibility, not as burden, but as power. You cannot control the world. You cannot prevent loss or death or illness, but you can choose how you respond. You can choose what kind of presence you bring, what kind of energy you leave behind. This is the ground of ethics in practice, not morality imposed from outside, but action born of awareness. You begin to see that what you do matters, that how you speak, how you listen, how you show up in the world, it all creates ripples. And those ripples are the only things you truly leave behind. These 5 remembrances are not ideas to memorize. They are truths to live. They are reminders to keep returning to what is real, to keep choosing presence over avoidance, to keep softening where you once resisted. Each one is an invitation not to escape the unknown, but to face it with open eyes and an open heart. They help you meet transitions not as disruptions, but as the fabric of life itself. Change is not the exception, it is the rule. And when you live with this understanding, you stop demanding stability where it does not exist. You start building resilience not through denial, but through awareness. In daily life, these remembrances guide your decisions. You stop postponing joy. You speak your truth with care. You create less harm. You love more deeply. You let go more gently. You begin to live as if each moment matters, because it does. This kind of living does not numb you to pain. It makes you more available to it, more honest with it, more able to be present with what arises without needing to change it or run from it. Because you are no longer surprised by impermanence, you are grounded in it. And from that ground, peace becomes possible. Not the peace of everything going your way, but the peace of knowing you are walking in alignment with truth. The peace that comes from not hiding anymore. The peace of letting life be what it is and still choosing to meet it with kindness. These remembrances are not just for meditation, they are for every conversation, every morning, every moment of waiting. They are tools for clear seeing, anchors in instability, lights that keep you steady in the dark. You don't have to remember them perfectly, just return to them when you forget. Let them soften your grip. Let them shape how you move through the world. Let them guide you into the unknown, not as a map, but as a compass pointing toward presence, compassion, and truth. In holding these truths, you are not giving up hope. You are choosing honesty. And that honesty becomes the root of freedom. The unknown no longer needs to be feared. It becomes part of the path. It becomes the path. One breath at a time, you walk forward, not away from change, but with it. Fully alive, fully here, fully ready. You've walked through the unknown. Step by step, breath by breath, you've touched teachings not meant to explain life, but to help you live it fully, honestly, and awake. You've seen how control is an illusion, how identity is a process, and how peace isn't found in the answers, but in the space where you stop needing them. From impermanence to compassion, from surrender to insight, you've returned again and again to the present, and there you've found clarity. Not because everything makes sense, but because you no longer demand that it should. You've learned to sit with chaos, to laugh at seriousness, to meet fear with kindness, and to walk even without knowing where the path leads. And that's the point. The teachings weren't about giving you certainty. They were about helping you rest in uncertainty with grace. Let that be your peace. If something in this journey touched you, one line, one teaching, one quiet truth, share it in the comments below. What stayed with you? What are you taking into the unknown? And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe. This space is here to guide you, to walk with you, and to keep bringing you wisdom for every step, especially the ones without a map. Rest now. You're right where you need to be.